At night, after Bai Qiran had just discussed the matter with other sect's representatives and was preparing to go back to the room to rest, he suddenly felt the energy of the sword he left in the ancient city. What? He immediately came to the table and spread out the map to check. Following the induction, he found the current approximate location of the ancient city on the map. It appeared so fast this time has its route changed. He marked a new point on the map, then picked up the map ready to tell others about it. After going round and round, he told this news to every sect leader and elder, but he couldn't find Yu Qianlian, so Bai Qiran asked a disciple of Skyforging Castle. Where is your sect leader? Master Yu went to the world furnace shortly after returning from that day. The disciple of Skyforging Castle replied respectfully to Bai Qiran. If you want to find him, you can wait a few more days. When he comes out, I will help you inform him. Bai Qiran thought about it. 9 provinces and 10 lands is huge. Even I can't rush from Skyforging Castle to the place where the ancient city appears in just 5 minutes, thus now the only plan is to wait for Xueling's information about this ancient city's operating mechanism, then find a way to stop it from the track. So he said to the disciple of Skyforging Castle. Okay, then I'll wait a few more days, let's see what these land immortals are doing when they change the route. He returned to the room and began to sense and record the route of the ancient city. After this change, the movement range of the ancient city began to be limited to the 4 adjacent big provinces: Qing Province, Gu Province, Lin Province, and Liang Province. Perhaps because the moving distance was shortened, the frequency of the ancient city from disappearing to appearing again has been shortened to once a day. Over the next few days, Bai Qiran has marked many more places on the map. Some of them were mountain villages and towns where people gathered, and some were uninhabited wilderness. Although the ancient city has changed its track, it still has not changed its fundamental purpose: to wake up something that was sleeping in 9 provinces and 10 lands. After the number of moving points on the map increased, Bai Qiran began to deduce its moving trajectory. Late at night, Bai Qiran, who was struggling to draw a graph, was suddenly interrupted by a cold wind. The wind rolled up the curtains in the room, making a fine crashing sound, with a smell of death in the wind. Bai Qiran sighed and put down the pen in his hand. Although you are a ghost, can you please knock on the door when you come in? It's not necessary. Soul takers do not need to maintain etiquette for living people. Xueling's figure emerged from the void, and then a scroll was thrown into Bai Qiran's hands. This is the teleportation method of the Land Immortal era. Thank you. What about your girlfriend? Bai Qiran took out a blank scroll and printed the contents on it to this blank scroll, and then put the reprinted scroll in his own storage bag, and returned the original scroll to Xueling. She is currently in the ghost world, helping me cover. Besides, this is a deal. You don't need to thank me, just help me to detain the souls of these land immortals. Xueling's eyes swept the map on Bai Qiran's table. What are you drawing? I'm measuring that city's new trajectory. Bai Qiran sighed. After being frightened by me that day, he immediately changed the trajectory of the ancient city. I am afraid that he wanted to first wake up some of the facilities of the previous era. Xueling looked at it and said, I may know how this thing moves. Oh? Bai Qiran asked quickly. How does it move? Xueling picked up the pen on the table, drew some points on the map, and then said, This is the activation array commonly used in the last era. It is not too difficult. The underworld has still used this method. It functions as a key to the lock, but its secret has been lost in your time. According to the position of this array, the thing he wants to wake should be here. Bai Qiran looked at the place that Xueling circled and was surprised. This place is the capital of Qing Province's Shangling Kingdom before it splits. That's normal. The remnants of the ordinary era like to rebuild civilization on the ruins of the previous era. Xueling threw the pen on the table and said quietly, So that's it, the deal is over and I'm gone. Wait a minute. Bai Qiran said. Can you tell me how the land immortal possessed Yu Qianren? When we found him, his deity soul is still the same as before. I have confirmed it. You know, the deity soul does not mean that the 3 souls and 7 spirits are all transformed into it. More exactly, the original 3 souls and 7 spirits are covered with a layer of consciousness which turned into deity soul. Xueling said, and suddenly glanced at Bai Qiran, laughed. Oh, I almost forgot. Qi-refining cultivators can't have a deity soul, so it's normal that you don't know. Bai Qiran's face darkened. He said coldly, You care about your job performance this year, don't you? Xueling slipped his head and did not answer, saying, That's it, I went back. Before Bai Qiran had attacked, he quickly walked into the void and disappeared. Damn, what an arrogant ghost. Chiron whispered, then looked at the map. But, deity soul? That is to say, the 3 souls and 7 spirits inside Yu Qianren's deity soul have been taken away by Land Immortal. Their technique is really impressive. He looked at the ancient emperor capital of the Shangling Kingdom, which was finally marked on the map, and then put away the map, took out the telescope array in the storage bag and studied it. This is the way to stop the ancient city. In the main hall of Skyforging Castle, Chiron took out a new scroll and handed it to the representatives. Then, I still have the formation of the teleportation array here. I have tested it. The things on it are genuine. This copy will be left in the book collection pavilion of the Righteous Alliance, so everyone can learn. Chiron said. However, this kind of formation is very difficult. You need to have very high attainments in spells, calculations and formations. Don't let people who are not good at math learn it. Moreover, to use this formation you must be at least deity transformation stage. Hearing what he said, the representatives of Jade Building, Mystery Academy, Heavenly Army all smiled, and even Weichen Master Monk of St. Buddha sect rarely gave a good mood to say Zensai. They did not ask Chiron where this scroll came from. As far as they knew, Sword Patriarch has lived for so long, and his friends were naturally not limited to 9 provinces and 10 lands. Of course, with Chiron's talent, he may be able to figure it out by himself. At this time, although evil sects were embarrassed to say, they also looked at the Righteous Alliance with envious eyes, and some of them even started to calculate the spy plan. Don't think about killing people and stealing treasure, or using spies to steal intelligence. Seeing the look of her colleagues, Su Xiangxue also said. Sword Patriarch also gave me a copy, and then I will send this formation to the hands of Heavenly Demon Sect and Nether Ghost Sect separately. Hearing her words, the fierce glare in the eyes of demonic cultivators who had been thinking about the evil plan subsided again, and when they were relieved they became a bit boring. Not doing bad things for a long time, they all felt that they were assimilated by the righteous way. Then I know the trajectory of the ancient city, the method of stopping. After you learn it we can go to block it. Chiron clapped. When the time comes we'll pay evil unto evil. Speaking of this, has little you come out of the furnace? Not yet. Su Xiangxue shook her head. Then we will wait a few more days and wait for everyone to learn how to stop the formation, and then set off to stop the ancient city. Chiron suggested. After all, time waits for no one. Although it's a bit unfair to little you, we really can't miss this chance. A few days later, the disciples of the major sects gathered outside the gate of Skyforging Castle and were ready to go. Chiron and others also no longer waited for Yu Qianlian, who had not yet appeared, to prepare to go directly to the place where the ancient city would appear. But just as everyone was about to leave, Yu Qianlian appeared. His face was tired and his clothes were crumpled. There were even some black marks on his face and he looked more like a beggar than a cultivator. Holding something wrapped by a white cloth in his hand he came to Huangfu Feng. Brother Huangfu, this is for you. He opened the white cloth. Inside it was a magic blade. The blade was dark, unpretentious, and only a green gem was inlaid behind the handle. Huangfu Feng recognized the gemstone inlaid on the handle and talked with a shocking voice. Soul-capturing stone? Little you are. I know that I can't save my elder brother. This weapon is called Soul-Absorbing Blade. I made it with the backbone of a demon dragon and the soul-capturing stone in the furnace of heaven and earth. It can absorb the soul of the cultivator who was killed by it. Yu Qianlian held the blade in both hands and handed it forward. Brother Huangfu, this knife is my reward, please use it to help me kill my brother. He lowered his head, concealing the painful expression, and handed the sword to Huangfu Feng. I understand. Huangfu Feng was silent for a moment, took this blade and put it behind him. I will use it to end his misery. In the ancient city, Yu Qianren looked at the densely packed light spots near Qing province on the map with satisfaction. Using the formation that could create a small space in the ancient city to create the vortex of the aura, that's the only way to make this activation formation which functioned as the key to open the wise immortal mansion. This was also the means left by the land immortals on the eve of the fall of the sacred dynasty. In this way, even if the plan for the return of the sacred dynasty fails, we are not without the possibility of making a comeback. He said to himself. Next is the end. He got up from the throne in the temple, his eyes penetrated through the darkness, and he shot at the square outside the temple. On the square, countless monsters whose whole body was covered with dark matter and white runes were flooding the whole square. They were people who have been captured by the bells in the ancient city from time to time in these days. All of them were transformed into monsters by him. In the era of the Sacred Dynasty they were called the Yellow Scarf Fighter. That's because in order to cover up their terrible appearance, the Sacred Dynasty had covered the monsters with yellow scarves. This kind of transformation required specific energy that only land immortals were able to form, and the upper limit of strength could only reach the level of physique integration stage. In order to create them, Yu Qianren has been collecting materials since it was awakened, and until now, it has exhausted the sense left by the last emperor of the Holy Dynasty to become such a large army. He originally believed that such a large army should be enough to sweep away all obstacles in this era. According to what he learned from the memory of this body, it seemed that this is indeed the case. But there was only one person who gave him no assurance of victory. Qingming Sword Patriarch. There are still such freaks in the world. He looked at the void outside the ancient city and murmured, "It's okay. Anyway, the future is set. Let me take a look at how you can stop me?" Although he was well aware that he's no match for Bai Qiran, he still has confidence in his heart. The teleport ability of the ancient was his biggest trump card. As long as he hid in a different plane, even Qingming Sword Patriarch had enough power of breaking up space. It's almost impossible to find his correct position in the void. Under the control of Yu Qianren, the ancient city slowly moved from the void to the designated location. Near the ruins of the ancient imperial capital of the Shangling Kingdom of Qing Province, a thick mist emerged out of thin air. Then, like a mirage, a figure gradually emerged from the fog, turned from virtual to real, and pressed against the ground, causing a tremor. As soon as he landed, the Yu Qianren in the ancient city immediately activated the formation in the city, because he knew in his heart that even if the other party did not understand the formation he used, they might have already figured out his final landing point. Sure enough, under the control of the ancient city hall, he sprayed a beam of light towards the sky, activating the entire formation. Around the city suddenly appeared innumerable presences of the cultivator. At the same time, there was a strong flow of true qi in all directions. Under the urging of these energies, a huge and complex formation appeared in the sky, which fell to the ground, linked to the power of the ground veins, and blocked the surrounding space, completely locked the ancient city in this place. Damn, when we left, His Majesty specially ordered people to remove all the space spells in the world. Yu Qianren gritted his teeth. Are these future generations figuring out by themselves so quickly? The original plan was disrupted in an instant. Yu Qianren felt that his face was hot. He immediately manipulated the defense mechanism of the ancient city. Within the ancient city, the big clock placed in the square in front of the temple swayed and issued a loud bell sound. At the same time, Yellow Scarf Fighter flew out of the city and attacked in all the directions where cultivators appeared. After finishing all this, he also got up and manipulated the last remaining material in the ancient city, forming a layer of black matter wrapped around his body, and then mixed among the Yellow Scarf Fighters. Yu Qianren first followed a team to the east, but he saw a cloud in the horizon of the east suddenly turned into more than 1,000 cultivators, standing densely in the clouds, forming a formation. In front of that formation 2 cultivators stood. One of them held a large jade pen and splashed ink in the clouds. Using the sky as a canvas, he painted countless dragons, phoenixes and unicorns in the clouds. These monsters turned into real things and slew a large number of Yellow Scarf Fighters. The other person kept pinching the magic seals with both hands, casting some spells that even Yu Qianren had never seen. Under his control, the weather began to transform, turning into infinite fire rain, wind blade and lightning bolt, blocked the way of the Yellow Scarf Fighters. The 2 men combined with the formation, and successfully blocked a large number of Yellow Scarf Fighters here. It's not easy to break through here. Yu Qianren retreated, and while no one was watching around the chaos, he quietly left the battlefield and flew towards the south. In the south, a force that was also no less than the east was waiting for him. In the air, countless black-armored soldiers stand in the clouds, and beside them are a group of monks covered in golden light. The 2 armies cooperate closely. The battle line formed like a grinding machine, crushing the charge of the Yellow Scarves without mercy. More importantly, there were also a black armor general and a flathead monk controlling the formation here. Like the previous 2, the 2 were also in the physique integration stage. The sword in the black armor general's hand was dancing, forming a dense net of sword beam. The flathead monk was empty-handed, but his fighting was even fiercer. At the climax he roared and turned into a tall wise king of wrath. Seeing that they were brave and strong, Yu Qianren retreated again and quietly changed direction. All directions are blocked. After some tries, Yu Qianren reached such a conclusion in his heart. Not only in the east and south but also in the west and north, there was also a formation composed of multiple cultivators plus 2 mighty in the physique integration stage. In the east there were 2 women, one holding a blade, cut the monsters vertically and horizontally, and the other was playing a musical instrument, exudes amazing but dangerous charm. In the south there were 2 old men with a group of disciples dressed in black clothes, manipulating a large black cloud, which seemed to be a simple poison cloud, but Yu Qianren could feel the flashing sword beam inside that cloud. Although the disciples who manipulated the sword lights seemed to be full of bitterness and helplessness, the sword in their hands was not fake. Yu Qianren even felt that these swords were even more dangerous than the black cloud. Trying all 4 directions, finding that there was no safe place to go, Yu Qianren retreated to the ancient city. He tried to escape but found that the formation was blocked in all directions, and even the secret method of escape into void space was not working. When he was struggling, a person suddenly patted him on the shoulder from behind. "What's up, man?" Hearing this voice, Yu Qianren pulled out the blade without hesitation, and turned back and slashed with all his strength. Under the control of the soul of a land immortal, the true chi of a physique integration stage cultivator poured unreservedly into the blade. He slashed with all his strength toward the person behind him, but that one just gently blocked the strike with one hand. Ouch, the temper is pretty big. Baiqiran pinched the blade and looked at Yu Qianren panting because of tension, laughing. "I thought that land immortals are terrific, but I walked with you and found that when you are facing enemies of the same level, you can also feel fear." During the speech, he suddenly raised his hand and pushed forward. Yu Qianren reached out to block it, only to feel that a burst of power poured into his body along with the golden palm print. Amidst a painful groan, his left arm was broken, twisting into a weird shape. Blood and bone burst out. Yu Qianren quickly withdrew from the force while waving the long blade in his hand, releasing countless blade beam, severing the surrounding earth, raising sand and dust, intending to block Baiqiran's sight. "Hey, this kind of trick can't blind me." A sword beam pierced out of the sand dust, penetrated the shoulders of Yu Qianren, and brought a bloody wound. He covered his shoulders, threw away the long blade in his hand, and manipulated it to fly around Baiqiran. At the same time, the hand originally holding the blade constantly made hand seals, and his broken arm was forcibly mended together. Clang! Baiqiran backhandedly knocked away the flying blade, which returned to the hand of Yu Qianren. The former slowly stepped out of the dust, looking at the latter's hand, and said, "I haven't seen this spell before. Is it something of your era?" Yu Qianren kept being silent, holding the blade in one hand and the other hand behind his back, and began to quietly pinch another seal. "You should be thinking of a way to get rid of me now. After all, you lived for so long, there must be a lot of your spells that I don't know that can work when I neglect. And because I am the strongest, so my companions also trust me completely. As long as you pass me, then you will have a chance to escape. Do you think so?" Baiqiran looked at the hand behind Yu Qianren and smiled. "To tell you the truth, even if you pass me, you will not be able to escape, and then you may encounter more difficult opponents." Humph. Yu Qianren snorted coldly, his palms loosened, and the long blade slowly floated to his front. He spun up quickly. By the power of his true chi, the long blade turned into a sharp blade wheel, raging like a hurricane. He didn't answer but reached for a finger and the blade wheel cut toward Baiqiran's head. The blade wheel's pressure alone cut the ground into multiple rifts, but Baiqiran just raised his hand and patted the blade wheel as if driving a mosquito away. The rapidly rotating blade wheel crossed the side of him. In a blink of an eye, it flew more than 10 miles away. Quick! At this time, Yu Qianren suddenly lifted the hand holding behind his back and shouted violently. Under the effect of his spell, space was alternately distorted in an instant. At the moment when Baiqiran was slightly surprised, the figure of Yu Qianren had disappeared from the front and went to a place more than 10 miles away in a blink. Baiqiran was shocked for a moment and then smiled. This land immortal has so many tricks, just like a circus. The long blade on the ground trembled twice and then, like being summoned, flew up and went after Yu Qianren, but Baiqiran just watched it fly away and did not stop it. "I have said that there are more difficult enemies after me. Why don't you believe it? Alas, I think I have always treated people with sincerity, but they won't believe me and it hurts." Baiqiran turned his head, looking at the direction of Yu Qianren running, shaking his head and saying, "You have taken Yu Qianren's body. It is not me who wants to kill you the most." Withdrawing his gaze, he stepped on his feet and left the place quietly. Yu Qianren held the long blade recalled by him and ran desperately, even daring not to look back at Bai Qiran. After just 2 fights, he once again felt the horror of this divergent cultivator. If it wasn't for his absent-mindedness, he might now have broken into a pool of meat. Running fast all the way, Yu Qianren could feel that the formation on the ground began to weaken. Almost there. As long as I crossed the big river in front and went to the other side of the river, I was out of the range of the formation suppression. At that time I could use the teleportation technique to escape directly, and when I found an opportunity, I would come back and take over the ancient city and wise immortal mansion. Yu Qianren constantly spurred himself in the heart and came to the river, but the figure standing in the heart of the river made him slowly stop. On the waves of the big river, Huangfu Feng stood in the center of the river, stepping on the waves carrying a black blade facing him, and the hem of the fur coat fluttered in the river wind. Last time I went to Skyforging Castle to get you a drink, little you told me that you to go out and collect materials for him. On the eve of my trip, there was a certain man who brought the wine to the door to tease me and said that if I had survived the heavenly tribulation, he would accompany me to drink for a month. I didn't expect that I have passed the heavenly tribulation, but didn't have the chance to talk to you. Huangfu Feng turned around and looked at Yu Qianren standing on the bank of the river. But it doesn't matter, we are best friends after all. It's fine if you don't fulfill your promise or be possessed by this kind of scum, I forgive you. He stretched out his hand and slowly pulled out the blade on his back, his eyes overflowing with the intention to kill. Big Yu, today I come to see you off. The river wind was blowing, the waves in the river were divided into 2 by the invisible sword, and the endless killing intentions rushed towards the Yu Qianren on the shore. Inside the Skyforging Castle, Tang Ruowei and Li Jinyao came to a room. 2 Skyforging Castle disciples standing outside the room stretched out their hands and asked, "Senior sisters, please stop. This is where Elder Lu rests. He has not yet awakened. Please leave." Tang Ruowei and Li Jinyao glanced at each other, then Li Jinyao stepped forward and smiled. "Junior brothers, we came here at the order of sect leader Yu to switch shift with the 2 of you. You should go to rest soon." This? The 2 disciples looked at each other, hesitating. "Here is the decree of sect leader Yu." Tang Ruowei took a piece of paper out of her sleeve and handed it to 2 disciples. The 2 disciples took the decree, glanced at it and said, "It is indeed the handwriting of the sect master, but he has commanded us before, unless he came in person, we must not let anyone go in. Oh, junior brother, if you can't believe us, then can you believe the sect behind us?" As she said, Li Jinyao silently activated Phantom Charm. Her actions seemed to be full of charm. "Come on, let your sisters change shifts for you, go back and have a rest." When the 2 disciples heard it, they immediately felt that the young girl became an enchanted woman, and the words spoken from her pink lips seemed to have an unspeakable power, made them feel like being allured. The 2 disciples had unconsciously agreed to Li Jinyao's request and left the place staggeringly. Sister Li's move is really terrible. Tang Ruowei looked at the back of the 2 disciples with lingering fear and sighed. "No, I'm still worse than Su Xiangshuang." Li Jinyao shook his head. "If sect leader Su comes here, only one look is enough to make them do anything." The 2 came to the gate of the courtyard and checked it. When they found no one nearby, Li Jinyao said, "This is not the time to talk, let's finish the things that Sword Patriarch ordered." She took some materials from her storage bag, sprinkled them on the ground and set up a formation. Tang Ruowei looked at her and suddenly asked, "Sister Li, you are so active. Do you really have an eye on my master?" "Not yet, but I am actually very fond of Sword Patriarch." Li Jinyao still did not shy away. It seemed that she inherited the fast and quick tongue of Huangfu Feng. "For so many years, I have rarely seen a person who can keep up with me in thinking and even better than me at some point. So Ruowei, maybe one day in the future I would become your master's wife." After all, she winked at Tang Ruowei playfully. "Why is that old man so popular?" Tang Ruowei muttered in a low voice, and inexplicably felt a little irritable. She suppressed this kind of distraction and also took out the materials, intently began to assist Li Jinyao's work. Above the river, a fierce battle was going on. With the rich knowledge and skills of the last era, Yu Qianren exerted nearly 120% of the peak strength of this body. He used his right hand to play a set of moves that Huangfu Feng haven't ever seen. Each slash had a different effect, a fierce fire, an ice haul, or a violent storm. His other hand constantly released spells, controlling the natural forces around him, and attacking the Huangfu Feng, intended to break through the siege and escape. However, even if he exerted the strength of the body to the extreme, it's still the power of the physique integration stage, which could not be the opponent of a great ascension demonic cultivator like Huang Fufeng. As the former leader of the Heavenly Demon Sect, current Great Elder, Huang Fufeng's qualifications may be not as good as his apprentice Ji Lingyun, and even several other elders, not to mention Li Jinyao. But with his perseverance, he has surpassed the qualification restrictions and has become the strongest demonic cultivator of this generation. He knew he was not smart enough, so the various techniques of the Heavenly Demon Sect, he only took one demonic blade, and used the time and perseverance to push it to an unprecedented height. At this time, facing the land immortal who had killed and replaced his best friend, he finally turned from an honest man with a bold personality, to become like a demon coming out of the devil sect, a crazy demon. Even though Yu Qianren had a delicate set of skills, Huang Fufeng's blade still mercilessly split all his offensives. His blade became faster and stronger with each slash. In his purple palace, a land gradually appeared under the feet of his nascent soul, which was the sign of becoming an immortal. As Huang Fufeng used a blade move, his deity soul in the spiritual platform also made the same move, and the more he used the demon sword technique behind him, a fierce demon god with 3 heads and 6 arms gradually emerged from the void and become more solid. The blade cut the river, and the ground peaks on both sides of the river bank were devastated. Huang Fufeng's heart was full of grief and anger, but ironically, in the battle to give his best friend a mercy kill, his spirit and willpower reached an unprecedented unification. The breath slowly rose, the true chi in the body was boiling, and gradually leaped to another higher level of energy. Damn, is this guy making a breakthrough during a fight? Yu Qianren certainly understood what those signs meant. That's why I hate these battle maniacs. Looking at the red light in the eyes, the breath became stronger and stronger. Yu Qianren could even see the black air visible coming out of the body of Huang Fufeng. He raised his hand and pinched a seal and rushed towards the Huang Fufeng. Huang Fufeng backhandedly made a slash, but his blade cut through the body of Yu Qianren and fell into the empty space. At the same time, Yu Qianren also raised the hand and slashed to his chest, but this blade did cut his shoulders without fail, and it cut all the way to the chest. The best way to deal with maniacs like you is to use these spells. Yu Qianren sneered. As long as a simple illusion spell is used, you people will be like donkeys who see radishes. He was talking, thus he didn't expect Huang Fufeng, who was just seriously wounded, without even saying a word, to give him another slash. This time Huang Fufeng's blade pierced into his abdomen accurately, and Yu Qianren felt a terrible pulling force from the black long blade, trying to absorb the deity soul in the spiritual platform. Cough. Huang Fufeng coughed up a bit of blood and whispered hoarsely. You talk too much. While speaking, he clenched his fist in the other hand and hit the face of Yu Qianren fiercely. The latter flew out, and the wound on his abdomen sprayed blood, leaving a red trail in the air. Huang Fufeng roared, ignoring the huge wound on his shoulder, lifted his blade, rushed into the smoke with the giant demon behind him, and caught up with the Yu Qianren who had not yet reacted. I'm a land immortal. You madman. Are you insane? Yu Qianren tried his best to resist Huang Fu's offensive and shouted loudly. With the knowledge of a land immortal, he was able to fight back and forth with Huang Fufeng, but now that Huang Fufeng has completely let go of his self-restriction, he could only focus all the strength to defend. Countless blade beams spread across all the scenes on the river bank. The giant demon god who wielded 6 blades also released thousands of slashes. Under the screams, the enemy was torn to pieces. Soon after finishing the formation, Tang Ruowei and Li Jinyao heard a painful moan from the room where Elder Lu was in. The two girls looked at each other, then rushed out side by side, shouting loudly. Come here, Elder Lu woke up. What? Elder Lu woke up? The shouts of the two immediately attracted the attention of a disciple of Skyforging Castle, and dozens of people nearby squeezed into Elder Lu's room. One of them, who looked like the eldest, turned his head and shouted loudly. Go and notify the sect leader. Taking advantage of this commotion, Li Jinyao and Tang Ruowei left quietly. What? Elder Lu woke up? Looking at the disciples who came to report, Yu Qianlian's face glowed with joy. Yes, sect leader. A disciple who worked under Elder Lu said to him. I saw with my own eyes that Elder Lu was indeed awake, and now a lot of brothers and sisters are watching him there. At this time, there is finally good news. Yu Qianlian hammered his thigh and said, I have to visit him. He got up and walked out of the door and the disciple followed him. Yu Qianlian pushed the door open, but there was a person standing at the door long enough to make him stunned. Bai Qiran was outside the door. Sword Patriarch? Why are you here? Yu Qianlian looked at Bai Qiran in amazement and asked, Are you destroying the ancient city? It's almost over. There is not much left to do. Bai Qiran smiled. I came here to wrap up, you come with me. In Elder Lu's room, a group of disciples was greeting with warmth. Under the cover of Yu Qianren, Elder Lu, who was escaped alive from the ancient city, also sat up, responding to the concerns of his disciples, coughing once or twice from time to time. The physique of the cultivator was much stronger than that of the mortal. Elder Lu just recovered from a coma, his serious wounds have not healed but still be able to sit up. This belonged to common situations. The only bad sign was that he coughed so much. Normally, a cultivator at his level would look as usual at this time. While the disciples interacted with Elder Lu in a friendly way showing the harmonious relationship, someone outside the door shouted loudly. The sect leader is here. The disciples in the room quickly separated, opened a road, and then watched Yu Qianlian came to the room with the disciples who had come to report. Old Lu. Upon seeing Elder Lu sitting on the bed, Yu Qianlian's face lit up with joy, and he quickly came to beside the bed. You finally woke up, are you okay? It's okay, senior brother, sorry to let you worry. Elder Lu coughed twice more palely, then said. How about the great elder? Has he returned safely? My brother? Yu Qianlian looked sad, seeing his face. Elder Lu already knew the result, so he sighed. What a great loss. Don't say this. Yu Qianlian patted his hand. I'm glad that you are okay. Rest well, we will not disturb you. He got up and prepared to leave, but Elder Lu took his hand. Sect leader. Elder Lu coughed twice and said weakly. Wait a minute, I have something to tell you alone. You have something to tell me? Living together for many years, Yu Qianlian had a deep trust in this fellow elder, so he thought about and then waved, All of you, go out first, I have to discuss with Elder Lu. The other disciples looked at each other and all went out, and the last disciple closed the door behind him. After sensing their breath and confirming that everyone walked away, Yu Qianlian sat down next to Elder Lu and asked. Old Lu, what do you want to discuss with me? That thing is just. Elder Lu smiled and suddenly turned his hand, and there was a pure black sharp peculiar prism in his hand. Before when Yu Qianlian could react, he stabbed towards his neck. Master Su's skill has improved again. Pulling her blade out of a corpse on the ground, Ji Lingyun admired the white lady in her side. This magical power of charm, even I can't help it but feel attracted. Sect leader Ji's swordsmanship also improves quickly. Su Xiangxue said. I believe it only takes you 2 years to defeat Zhu Yunzi of Qingming Sword Sect. That guy, sooner or later he will cut his mouth and drink. Speaking of Zhu Yunzi, Ji Lingyun's look became very bad, he sneered, then said. But sect leader Su, your target is much more difficult than mine. I can only pray for you. Hope you can slay that man as soon as possible. Sect leader Ji, I didn't want to kill him. Su Xiangxue wears the veil taken from the battle and smiles bitterly and says. Okay, don't talk about these disappointing topics, sect leader Ji, these monsters have been almost dealt with, let's hurry into the city and finish it. Okay. Ji Lingyun nodded, and the 2 female sect leaders were about to march towards the ancient city, but the beam of light in the ancient city suddenly shined. Be careful. Su Xiangxue quickly grabbed Ji Lingyun, who was so reckless, and the disciples of Kamasutra sect and Heavenly Demon sect also quickly stopped. At the next moment, the beam of light in the ancient city suddenly expanded, drowning everything in light. On the bank of the big river, Huang Fufeng slowly stood up. Under his spell, his wound quickly stopped bleeding and began to heal at a speed visible to the naked eye. In front of him, there was a wounded body of Yu Qianren who had been chopped up. Under the influence of the true qi remaining in the body, the small wounds on the body of Yu Qianbla had been closed, excluding the wound on his forehead. That fatal wound was caused by a blade went between his eyebrow, penetrating through his spiritual platform. The soul that once possessed Yu Qianren's body was sucked into the blade created by Yu Qianlian. Huang Fufeng held the blade in front of his eyes. The green dementor at the handle flashed a glimmer of light. He watched for a moment and then slowly retracted the blade back to the sheath. Big Yu. He picked up the body of Yu Qianren on the ground, looked at it for a while, then sighed. Rest in peace. The river wind seemed to whimper. Huang Fufeng was carrying his friend's body and was preparing to go back. At that time, the beam of light suddenly increased several times in the direction of the ancient city in the distance, illuminating the whole sky. Above the sky, it seemed to be pierced by a beam of light, and a wonderful vortex formed by clouds and space rifts appeared, slowly rotating and expanding continuously. In this vortex, a huge towering mountain grew upside down, slowly fell to the sky, and stopped a few miles above the ruins of Shangling Kingdom. Skyforging Castle. Elder Lu's room. Elder Lu, who was sitting on the bed, suddenly changed his expression. He held a dark, sharp and wonderful prism, poured his whole true qi into it, and slammed toward the neck of Yu Qianlian, who was sitting beside the bed. With a thumping noise, the prism was indeed undoubtedly hit Yu Qianlian's neck, but it was the prism that broke into pieces in front of this thin skin. How can it be? Elder Lu widened his eyes and lost his voice. Surprise. At this moment, Yu Qianlian also suddenly reached out and grabbed his face. Feeling the irresistible power, Elder Lu realized. You are not Yu Qianlian, you are. Yes. The face of Yu Qianlian slowly twisted and changed, and his hair color changed from black to white, eventually becoming a person that Elder Lu didn't want to see the most at this time. He pointed his thumb at his face and smiled proudly. It's me, Bai Qiran. Creator's body forging technique gave Bai Qiran the ability to change his body at will. He used this method to temporarily change himself into Yu Qianlian, and then to test Elder Lu. Elder Lu's face changed drastically and he wanted to use his escape technique, but as soon as he moved, Bai Qiran put his palm on his chest before that. Elder Lu has not recovered from his serious injury. Let's lie down and recuperate. The majestic palm power came through the body and instantly shattered the nascent soul in the Elder Lu's purple palace. The out-of-control true qi rushed through the body. Elder Lu's face turned red, coughed up a big mouth of blood, and dyed a piece of the blanket in red. Look, it's coughing up blood. Bai Qiran smiled softly, reaching for the forehead of Elder Lu gently. Elder Lu, have a good night's sleep. At the same time when speaking, his qi was poured into the body. Elder Lu's body, except for the surface, was internally disturbed by Bai Qiran's qi. His body twitched violently, his legs curled up as if they were springs. Then, a dim light flew out of his spiritual platform and flew towards the outside of the room. That's his deity soul without using spells, except for the immortals. Only about such a man as Bai Qiran, who has been on the edge of life and death for a long time, can see it directly with the naked eye. But even if he saw it, Bai Qiran didn't care. He just watched the deity soul of Elder Lu escape from under his eyes. A moment later, Li Jingyao and Tang Ruowei pushed open the door and walked in one after the other, followed by a particularly depressed Yu Qianlian. Have you caught it? Bai Qiran asked. Li Jingyao nodded and found a small green dementia stone, a bright light flashing inside the stone. This was why Bai Qiran let her and Tang Ruowei come here to arrange in advance. The two girls arranged a complex formation method provided by Xueling. It did not have any effect on living beings, but it's able to capture the soul of the immortal. Good, give it to me. Bai Qiran took the stone, and then looked at Yu Qianlian, who was gloomy next to him. Little Yu. I'm okay, Sword Patriarch. Yu Qianlian smiled bitterly. Think carefully, Elder Lu was not very good at fighting. Why could he escape from the ancient city, but my elder brother couldn't? I'm afraid he was accidentally possessed by Land Immortal in the process of fighting, and then backstabbed my big brother. Bai Qiran didn't know what comforting words he should say at this moment. Although the person in front of him was already a sect leader, in his eyes, Yu Qianlian was always a kid. I'm fine, Sword Patriarch. Yu Qianlian looked up at Bai Qiran and said. This is not your responsibility. You don't need to blame yourself. Land Immortals already exist in this world. Even if they don't come this time, they will come sooner or later. Big Brother and Elder Lu just unfortunately fell down on this way. Bai Qiran could only reach out and pat his shoulders, saying, Hold yourself. I know. Yu Qianlian nodded and said, I'm no longer the kid whom you had to pick up after fighting. Even if Big Brother and Elder Lu are gone, I will continue to lead the Skyforging Castle. After a short pause, he said, Sword Patriarch, you may go and do your business, and I am going to write an obituary. Sword Patriarch, please don't let any of these Land Immortals escape. I will. Bai Qiran nodded and looked at Tang Ruowei and Li Jingyao. You stay here, I will go to complete the transaction. After leaving Skyforging Castle, Bai Qiran quickly returned to the outside of the ancient imperial capital of Shangling Kingdom, where the ancient city stopped, But at this time he found that the place had completely changed. The pillars of light from the ancient city have disappeared. Instead, there was a 1,000-mile-high mountain hanging upside down from the sky. The peak hangs a few miles above the ground, and just below this peak was the original ancient city. Bai Qiran looked around and found Su Xiangxue and others at the gate of the ancient city. He hurried over and asked, "What's the matter?" "During our battle, the formation was completed." Su Xiangxue glanced back from the sky and replied, "This is probably the goal of land immortals. They have awakened what they want to awaken." Elder Su of Mystery Academy also looked up at the sky at this time and muttered, "This mountain is connected to another small world. This is an immortal mansion." His face was fanatical as if he wanted to rush in to study immediately. "Hold yourself back, this is a dangerous thing. If something goes wrong, well, I don't want to listen to your Dean Qiu Yuxuan chatter anymore." Bai Qiran reminded him and then said, "Battalion Commander Zhang Weichen, please look after him, don't let him rush up." Zhang Ruifei and Weichen Master Monk nodded, and Bai Qiran came to Huang Fufeng again, and looked at the body put on the stretcher with him. "Sorry for your loss." After a moment he patted the elder Taizongzong's shoulder, saying, "Little Yu is already preparing for the aftermath. Take his body back to Skyforging Castle." "I will," Huang Fufeng responded. "And what about the soul of the land immortal you killed?" Bai Qiran asked. "In the soul-absorbing blade," Huang Fufeng replied. "I want to take him back and torture him with the soul furnace in the heavenly demon sect. What do Sword Patriarch want?" Bai Qiran briefly mentioned his deal with Xueling and then asked, "Can you give me his soul? Can Sword Patriarch guarantee that his soul will be tortured like in a soul furnace?" Huang Fufeng asked back. "Okay." Bai Qiran thought for a moment, then said, "Have you heard of hell?" "Good." Huang Fufeng nodded with satisfaction, removed the soul-absorbing blade from his back, and handed it to Bai Qiran. "Then Sword Patriarch, please arrange it." "I don't have to. The underworld must have arranged it already." Bai Qiran took soul-absorbing blade and said to Su Xiangxue, "I'm leaving for a while." He carried the blade and walked to a secluded place far away from the ancient city, and then used the seal tactic to summon the ghost. The breeze lifted the catkins of the willow and a cold breath struck. Xueling's figure appeared quietly beside Bai Qiran. "Did you kill them all?" Xueling appeared beside Bai Qiran and asked lightly. "Just 2. Bai Qiran took out the soul-capturing stone given to him by Li Jinyao and showed the soul-absorbing blade in front of Xueling. "You have to find the rest. I guess all of them are still in that ancient city." "Okay." Xueling extended his hand. "Give it to me." "Not so fast." But Bai Qiran suddenly withdrew his hand. He looked at Xueling and asked, "Can you tell me one thing first? These land immortals keep mentioning Sacred Dynasty. What is it? You said you didn't know before, but after this incident came out, I believed you have investigated it, right?" "I did investigate and knew a lot of things." After a moment of silence, Xueling said, "But there are confidentiality regulations, thus I can't tell you. Otherwise, not only my soul will be obliterated, even Mingying, my subordinates and friends will also be implicated." "Oh?" Bai Qiran asked. "Is it related to the immortal realm?" "I can't say." Xueling turned his head. "But if you really want to know, then go find it yourself. The secret you want to know lies in Wise Immortal Mansion. If you are lucky, you may even learn how to break through the Qi refining stage." Wise Immortal Mansion. Bai Qiran chewed these words. "Where is that?" Xueling pointed to the sky in the distance, and Bai Qiran looked up and found that it was the towering mountain that hung down from the sky. "That's the entrance of Wise Immortal Mansion," Xueling said. "If you want to know the answer, go find it yourself." Bai Qiran thought for a moment, and then threw the soul-capturing stone and the soul-absorbing blade to Xueling. The soul-taker took it, then took out a paper lantern from the void and flicked it. 2 green lights were sucked out of the stone and the blade and were absorbed into the paper lantern. "Wait a minute." Watching Xueling put away the lantern, Bai Qiran said, "Although you refuse to say it, I guess that these land immortals should be the losing side in some kind of battle. What will happen to them after you are taken to the underworld?" "What should I do?" "Normally if a person didn't make a big mistake he will be sentenced to reincarnation, but these 2 guys, directly and indirectly, led to the death of tens of thousands of people. Then," Xueling replied coldly, "the only sentence that is waiting for them is to suffer in 18 circles of hell. Why do you ask? Do you want to plead for them?" Of course not. Bai Qiran asked. I just want to know if they will go to seamless hell. Xueling thought about it. Although their crime is on the edge so the sentencing is in a subtle position, I guess they will go to that in the end. That's good. Bai Qiran was relieved. I don't need you anymore, just go away. Xueling was also not annoyed. He turned and walked towards the direction of the ancient city. His figure gradually blurred and disappeared into the wind. At the same time, Mystery Academy disciples who just entered the ancient city to search, and found 2 rows of black prisms from an underground mausoleum, suddenly felt a gust of wind passing by. After became cultivators, they were no longer afraid of the cold and heat, but this gust of wind was so cold that even they felt a chill ran down the spine. The feeling was like falling into the ice cave, making their minds have a short numbness. After this gust of wind disappeared, the disciples of Mystery Academy recovered, but they were surprised to find that the prisms actually shattered into pieces and turned into piles of black fine sand. The disciples quickly reported to Elder Su of Mystery Academy, who led people her as fast as possible and looked at this scene in amazement. What happened? He asked. I don't know, we just feel a cold wind blowing and it turns to this. Several disciples replied, but they couldn't explain why. Elder Su went down to check and found that there was no response in these fine sands, so he said angrily. These things must be the same as the cracked prism before, all of them are valuable research materials related to the secrets of land immortals. Now you tell me that they're all gone? The disciples of the Mystery Academy who were responsible for guarding here bowed their heads and did not dare to say anything. All right, Elder Su, don't be angry. At this time, Bai Qiran walked in from outside the mausoleum. He glanced at the prism that shattered into fine sand on the ground, and then said to Elder Su, I know who did it. Don't blame these disciples. Sword Patriarch. Elder Su was stunned for a moment, and then depressed his temper, saying, Who did that? Bai Qiran walked to Elder Su and whispered to his ear. Elder Su suddenly realized. It turned out to be. Don't say it out loud. Bai Qiran said. There are still many things in this ancient city, enough for you to research for a long time. He turned and walked out, looking up at the mountain above him. After a while, Su Xiangxue came to his side and looked up at the sky with him, asking, Have all the souls of land immortal been arrested by the soul taker? Well, I didn't leave any, so he won't have trouble. Bai Qiran replied. Not only he has just been promoted, but he also found a partner. When he was alive he was single. After he died he finally found his soulmate. After all, we are old acquaintances who had known each other for so many years, not to mention that we can intercept this ancient city this time because of his help. I would feel quite too embarrassed if his joy turns into sadness because of me. People can find their soulmate even after they die. When will you be able to find yours? Su Xiangxue said quietly. Bai Qiran sighed. Yeah, when? The iron tree blossoms new buds, and the deadwood will still re-emerge every spring. No one is forever young. When will Qiran get married? Su Xiangxue continued to mutter with a grudge. Are you here to make fun of me? Bai Qiran asked with a stinky face. Su Xiangxue really wanted to go back and say that actually I'm here to make love with you, but after thinking it over carefully she felt that it was too inelegant, afraid that Bai Qiu would not like it, so she changed her words. Seriously, have you ever thought about getting married? She looked up at Bai Qiran and encouraged. Wealth, technique, partner, and land are 4 things that are indispensable for cultivators. This sentence is not empty talk. Maybe if you find a girl, you will have inspiration, and can you break through the foundation establishment stage? This one? Bai Qiran looked a little moved, but after thinking about it, he shook his head again. Forcing marriage is not something a righteous person should do, and I don't have a suitable object in my heart. I'll try again to see can I break through the foundation establishment stage by myself? Su Xiangxue rolled her eyes. With all my respect, you have tried for more than 3,000 years. It's different this time. Bai Qiran looked at the sky and pointed to the mountain peak and said, This time someone told me clearly that there might be a clue about how someone like me breaks through the foundation establishment stage. I think that at least I have to take a look. In the concept of mortals, Immortal Mansion was the place where the immortal lived. In the concept of the cultivator, it was an independent small world, which was opened up by those cultivators who have the ability to move mountains and fill the sea. Although in the cultivation world nowadays, this kind of magic that could open up an independent world has been lost, in the library of some large sects that existed before the war between humans and demons, there were still some vague records. According to the above statement, in the previous era, as long as the cultivator reached the physique integration stage, he could use a special space technique to open up his own independent world. However, because of the chronology in the current cultivation world, the study of space magic was just getting started. In Jade Tower, Mystery Academy, and some other famous big sects in the world, there were only 1 or 2 places that used space technology. Compared with the techniques of the ancient city to manipulate space, these techniques were still very rough and took a lot of manpower and material resources to develop and use, which was very troublesome. Most of the immortal mansions that existed in the cultivation world today were left over by the mighty who lived from many years ago. But none of them could compare to the immortal mansion awakened by the ancient city. This mansion broke the sky, created a spatial vortex, looked like a mountain hang upside down from the sky, and this was only the entrance. Since the battle with the land immortals, the Righteous Alliance and the Evil Alliance have tacitly sent people to block this entrance, but there were still many cultivators took advantage of when these 2 factions, for the sake of 9 provinces and 10 lands, fought the monsters of ancient city, to quietly fly across the battlefield and sneak into this entrance. They came with the attitude of fishing in mud waters, and wanted to take advantage of the fact that 2 largest forces were busy to enter this unique immortal mansion and seek opportunities and treasures, wishing to become strong enough to make the 2 factions admiring them. People were always self-interested. This kind of thing has happened many times before, and it has been repeatedly banned. Once these people have already entered, the Righteous Alliance and the Evil Alliance had no way to deal with them. Fortunately, after the 2 factions sent people to blockade, no more people sneaked in here. Of course, there were 2 sides to everything. The Righteous Alliance and the Evil Alliance joined forces to block the entrance. On the one hand, that's because they wanted to get lead. On the other hand, it also prevented those who were not good enough from risking their lives. Moreover, the cultivators who sneaked in before did give help to the 2 forces. At least after several cultivators were killed by a bolt of sudden lightning, the 2 forces also figured out the limit of the entrance. Below the nascent soul stage and above the foundation establishment stage, this was the entry threshold for this immortal mansion. Once the entrance cultivation level reached the nascent soul stage or above, the formation at the entrance would be activated, attracting thunder and lightning in the sky, allowing the cultivators to enjoy the happiness of experiencing the tribulation early, and passing away on the spot. Withstanding the heavenly tribulation said that it is these cultivators who have not yet reached the stage of crossing tribulation. Even for Huang Fu Feng, who has already survived the heavenly tribulation, the experience was so awful that he never wanted to go through it again. And the reason why the entry threshold was above the foundation establishment stage, that's because only the cultivators who have reached the foundation establishment stage could fly with flying swords and reach the entrance located several miles high in the sky. Of course, this restriction had no effect on a certain man. So I want to go in this time. In the main hall of Qingming Sword Sect, Bai Qiran said seriously while facing a group of elders and sect leaders. You can arrange the rest of the staff. I must go up anyway. Uncle Ancestor, if you are going, we definitely won't object. Zhu Yunzi said. This is very dangerous. After all, it is the immortal mansion where the land immortal awakens at the expense of his life. No one knows what is hidden inside, and we can only send out those below the nascent soul stage. If Uncle Ancestor takes care of them, of course we should rest assured. No, I mean, Bai Qiran said. You have to form a team this time, just as if I did not go. I also want to go in to find a chance, lest I have to act alone. When everyone goes together, I can of course protect those disciples, but once I leave they still have to rely on themselves. Okay. Zhu Yunzi pondered for a moment and then said. Then how about this? We Qingming Sword Sect enter in 2 batches, what do you think? He looked at his senior brothers and sisters and then at Bai Qiran. Always under the care of Uncle Ancestor, these little kids won't get any experience. It's better to hide this fact from them and let them figure out their own way. Uncle Ancestor, please wait for everyone to enter, then you can go in by yourself and look for opportunities. If our disciples really encounter a crisis that cannot be resolved, it will not be too late for you to help. Okay. Bai Qiran nodded and said. Does anyone have opinions? The elders of the Qingming Sword Sect all nodded. None of them mentioned other circumstances, such as what should the Qingming Sword Sect disciples do if they encountered danger in other places when Bai Qiran left without knowing it. Cultivation was inherently going against heaven. Although the righteous cultivators did not advocate harming others and benefiting themselves as the demonic cultivator, in any case, cultivation always has to seize the heavens and the earth to nurture oneself. Otherwise the heavens would not give heavenly tribulation when someone was about to ascend to immortality. And to treat their own disciples, the masters of the cultivation world must sometimes learn to push them into a dangerous situation, just like an eagle pushing a cub down a cliff. A cultivator who could not learn to face a crisis, like an eagle that couldn't fly, could live comfortably for a while, but sooner or later would have to pay a price. After returning to the 7-star peak, Baichiran began to prepare what he needed to explore the mansion. In fact, he didn't have much to prepare. He just prepared something to replace those he couldn't use with the seal technique, some necessary small magic props, and hundreds of brand new fine iron swords. His actions naturally aroused the suspicion of Tang Ruowei, who was living together with him, but Baichiran still chose to treat her equally and didn't tell her anything. However, in the team sent by the Qingming sword sect this time, Tang Ruowei and another disciple who had heavenly-level spiritual root were chosen to go in. Together with other Qingming disciples, they would explore this immortal mansion. And Baichiran also heard Tang Ruowei say that the person leading the exploration team of Qingming sword sect was a person he's very familiar with. Staying up late to prepare Tang Ruowei's necessary talisman and pill, early the next morning, Baichiran took Tang Ruowei to the main peak of the Qingming sword sect. Tang Ruowei was going to assemble and set off with the exploration team, and although Baichiran didn't tell them that he would also go to the Mainyan, nominally he had to take the Qingming sword sect team to the town. He wanted to go in, so Zhu Yunzi had to go with him. When Baichiran entered, he would become the host instead. It was embarrassing for Baichiran to let his apprentice bring him over the main peak by flying sword. As soon as Baichiran landed, he saw a dark figure rushing towards him. "Damned old man, see my kick." The little dark figure yelled, jumped up high and kicked him in the face. Baichiran subconsciously slapped her to the side, and the black shadow rolled and fell into a bush on the side of the road. Then a girl who was about 12 or 13 years old was touching her head and crying out in pain. "What?" Seeing this little girl, Baichiran was stunned for a moment and then said, "Little Egg, is it you?" "What the hell is Little Egg?" Tang Ruowei was shocked. "Master, this is Sister Qing Danying, one of the guardian spirit beasts of the Qingming sword sect." "I know." Baichiran nodded. At this moment, Qing Danying had stood up. She patted the weeds on her head, yelled, and put on a fist posture with her arms raised flat like a cross. "Damn thief. Look at my new move." Qing Danying shouted angrily to Baichiran. "This move is the posture I have learned from the supreme cultivation technique of my clan. It is like a phoenix on the parasol tree spreading its wings, possessing the power of burning everything into ashes. This move will definitely beat you." "Little Egg," Baichiran said to her lightly. "You are a chicken, don't pretend to be a phoenix." "Shut up." Qing Danying's face flushed with anger, furious. "Take my move, Sky Soaring Cross Phoenix." She jumped high, hovering around her body with a mysterious emerald green fire, and then the little girl waggled her tail in midair, kicking it straight towards Baichiran's face. Although this kick looked a bit funny, its power was real. As one of the guardian spirit beasts, Qing Danying's cultivation level was also at the peak of the nascent soul stage. If this kick hit a mountain, it could directly blast the mountain's top half away, not to mention the emerald green fire released by Qing Danying, which made it even more powerful. But unfortunately, the target of her attack was the old monster Baichiran, who had lived for 3,000 years. Immediately before Qing Danying's kick hit, Baichiran has seen through the trajectory of her attacks. Although the little girl was extremely fast, he still grabbed her ankle easily and lifted it upside down. As for the green fire mixed with the attack, Baichiran unloaded it into the sky casually, knocking out a big hole in the sky, and then bursting into an emerald green firework. "Little girl, if you want to defeat me, go back and train for 2,000 to 3,000 years more." Baichiran shook Qing Danying, then threw her aside. The little girl gave a painful grunt, rolled on the ground twice, then got up and stared at Baichiran with angry eyes. "Sister Qing Danying." Tang Ruowei persuaded. "Give up, you can't beat him." Qing Danying's face blushed and white, then snorted and turned her head, "Come to gather." Taking a duck-like step like a king, she walked past Baichiran with her head high and walked further inward. Tang Ruowei took the opportunity to walk up, and whispered to Baichiran. "Master, have you had a problem with her?" "This? When you joined the sect, didn't that stinky boy Zhu Yunzi told you that I raised a chicken that has transformed into human form?" Baichiran scratched his face, a little ashamed. "She is that chicken." "Ah, what?" Tang Ruowei said in surprise. "But I heard people say that Sister Qing Danying is really a blue pheasant, the legendary bird of good fortune?" Yes, but when I picked her up at the vegetable market in the town under the mountain, she was thin and small, and her fur was still black. I thought it was a silky chicken. Chiron touched his chin and said. Later, after 100 or 200 years of raising, her fur color became bluer and bluer. I wondered if the chicken had mutated from eating some herb. Tang Ruowei was speechless and then asked. Then why is she so hostile to you? Logically, aren't you her master? Yeah, I am puzzled too. Chiron replied. Even if she is a blue pheasant, I didn't ask her to do anything special and have fed her well. At most, I let her lay an egg every day to improve my meal. What's wrong? This. I think there is a record in the ancient books that the sacred birds such as the blue pheasant and phoenix saw their eggs as children. Tang Ruowei hesitated for a long time but still whispered. Then I think you deserve it. But I did everything. After the girl transformed into human form, she kicked me in the face without saying anything, and then ran to the main peak and didn't go back. Chiron touched his head. Then I can't help but let her hate me. Tang Ruowei sighed helplessly. The master and apprentice walked side by side to the school grounds of Qingming Sword Sect. Other direct disciples had already arrived one after another, and the head of the sect, Zhu Yunzi, was also standing in front of the school grounds. Qing Danying, who had just rushed in, also stood akimbo beside Zhu Yunzi, like a big sister. When she saw Chiron coming in, she snorted and twisted her head aside. Chiron ignored her and led Tang Ruowei all the way forward. He walked to the other side of Zhu Yunzi, while Tang Ruowei got into the team of his disciples and stood at the back of the team. And at this time, Chiron finally saw another heavenly-level spiritual root disciple who was accepted as a direct disciple by Zhu Yunzi. This is an ordinary-looking young man who looks a little woody, wearing a dress that was passed down to him, standing among other disciples as if in a daze. Chiron took a look and found that his attribute was metal, which coincided with the attributes of Zhu Yunzi's favorite sharp golden sword. His current cultivation level was roughly in the late period of the foundation establishment stage, which was slightly weaker than Tang Ruowei who has reached the peak. But Tang Ruowei currently cultivated in other areas, while this young man solely focused on the sword, his sword aura seemed to have been initially solidified. If Tang Ruowei really fought him, who would win was still unclear. Nodding in satisfaction, Chiron and Zhu Yunzi looked at each other. The latter apparently noticed Chiron's gaze and showed him a slightly proud smile. Then he raised his hand and began to announce to these disciples what they would do when exploring the immortal mansion. Tiel's note. After the announcement, Zhu Yunzi and Chiron took the disciples and went on the way. Because of the speed of the disciples, Chiron didn't go by himself, but sat on the sword of Zhu Yunzi and let his disciple take him to fly. The disciples of the Qingming Sword Sect, with varying levels of cultivation, naturally couldn't run across a province in an instant like Chiron. Many of them were golden cores, some like Tang Ruowei and Zhu Yunzi's student was just foundation establishment stage. Counting the time they stopped along the way to rest, it took nearly a month to arrive at the designated place. After arriving at the place, they happened to meet the disciples of the Heavenly Demon Sect brought by Huangfu Feng and Ji Lingyun. The distance between the headquarters of the Heavenly Demon Sect and the imperial capital of the Shangling Kingdom was a little farther than the Qingming Sword Sect, which was adjacent to Qing Province. However, the Supreme Elder Huangfu Feng of the Heavenly Demon Sect has reached the Great Ascension stage. He was able to carry all the disciples on his own flying blade, unlike Chiron who could only sit awkwardly on the flying sword of his disciple. Looking at other disciples of Qingming Sword Sect flew by themselves. Under these conditions, it caused the Heavenly Demon Sect team which was farther away to collide with the Qingming Sword Sect team. As soon as the two parties met, the Heavenly Demon Sect's leader Ji Lingyun looked very unsightly when she saw that Zhu Yunzi. Why does it stink like shit around here? She frowned in disgust, touched the bare part of her arm and said to herself. It's really bad luck. Oh, why didn't I smell it? Miss Lingyun, have you cultivated a technique to enhance the sense of smell? Zhu Yunzi touched his nose very unconsciously, and then said to Ji Lingyun with a smile on his face. It's been a long time, Miss Lingyun. I'm relieved to see that you are still so manly. This smell is really getting worse and worse. Ji Lingyun smiled like a flower, but there were obvious blue veins on her forehead, and the long knife on her waist was slightly unsheathed, saying, It seems that this cesspit needs to be plugged, right everyone? She turned to look at the disciples she had brought, but it was obvious that none of the disciples of the Sky Demon Sect paid any attention to her. Li Jingyao smiled gently at the disciples of the Qingming sword sect and looked at every male disciple of the Qingming sword sect with twinkle eyes, but after a while she withdrew her gaze again in disappointment, and then looked at another. When her gaze met by Chiron, who was standing behind Zhu Yunzi, she nodded with satisfaction. The second apprentice, Tayan, was standing on the spot and giggling. Ji Lingyun didn't know what she was smirking. The eighth apprentice took out a lot of miscellaneous novels and brought several apprentices around, reading the book without talking. The third apprentice, Yin Chaji, with an aggressive smile, leaned on the eldest apprentice who was studying a technique. Hee, dear senior brother, what are you reading? Let this junior brother join with you. Don't do that, Chaji. A large group of direct disciples of the heavenly demon sect, who was carefully taught by her, have well inherited the tradition of the demon sect to deceive the master and destroy the ancestor. At this critical moment of the tit-for-tat between the righteous cultivator and demonic cultivator, no one responded to her. Ji Lingyun's heart was a little sad, and even the anger that was picked up by Zhu Yunzi went out. She sighed lightly and put the blade back in its sheath. Then the next moment she heard Zhu Yunzi's introduction to Bai Qiran for herself. When I was traveling, I ran into Miss Ji taking a bath in a lake in Yong province. She carried a blade and chased me naked for 3 days and 3 nights. So manly. Boom. A burst of true qi erupted from Ji Lingyun's body, forming a tall imaginary image of the heavenly demon. She slashed out, and countless phantoms of the demon god bloomed from the blade, wailing and rushing towards the direction of Zhu Yunzi. Damn. Really? Zhu Yunzi screamed, but he withdrew his sword very calmly. Under his control, the cyan flying sword under his steps swung countless mysterious trails in the air, and the sword beam cut Ji Lingyun's move into tiny pieces. Haha, Miss Lingyun, you aren't good enough to attack me. Zhu Yunzi smiled triumphantly. Don't forget that Qingming sword sect's disciples are unrivaled in one-on-one combat, haha. But he forgot one thing. To use this move he needed to withdraw his flying sword, therefore Bai Qiran, who was standing with him on the flying sword, no longer had a foothold. As a physique integration stage cultivator, he could naturally float in the air at will, but Bai Qiran couldn't. In the direction that Zhu Yunzi did not see, the disciples Qingming sword sect and heavenly demon sect watched Bai Qiran fall in a freely landing position, and then looked at the Qingming sword sect's leader with the "you are already dead" eyes. In the afternoon, Su Xiangxue also came here with the disciples of the Kamasutra sect. The disciples of the Kamasutra sect were all women, and because of the technique they practiced, all of them of fascinating and charming temperament. They followed the sect leader to the ground. That's when they saw a young man who was hung upside down on a tree with a bloody nose and swollen face. The disciples of the Kamasutra sect were curious, had a twittering discussion, and then one asked Su Xiangxue, "Master, who is that person?" Su Xiangxue took a look and found the one who just asked was her direct student, Yu Meiqiao. Like Su Xiangxue, she was also half human and half demon, born from the time the demon staying in the 9 provinces and 10 lands, and she also cultivated the phantom charm. However, unlike Su Xiangxue, who has a quiet and gentle personality and has been trained by Bai Qiran, Yu Meiqiao inherited the bloodline of Nightingale demon. She was eccentric and lively. Su Xiangxue touched her head and looked at the person who was hanging upside down on the tree. After only one glance, she recognized the person's identity and replied lightly. "This person is Zhu Yunzi, the current head of the Qingming sword sect." What? When the disciples heard this, they immediately started discussing in a panic. Yu Meiqiao also asked. "I heard that the sect leader of the Qingming sword sect, Zhu Yunzi, is the #1 master among all sect leaders of the Righteous Tao League. With the sharp golden sword in hand he is invincible. Even you have admitted that you are not his opponent. Now even he was hung there, is it?" "Don't panic." Su Xiangxue replied. "I know who did it, don't worry, it's not the first time Zhu Yunzi was beaten like this." Could it be that we demonic cultivators have hidden masters? The disciples of the Kamasutra sect were still shallow. Although they joined a major evil sect, they still retained a trace of their conscience. In their thought, cultivators could never do something so cruel to their own people. On the contrary, Yu Meiqiao seemed to have thought of something, looking at her master with twinkling eyes. Su Xiangxue also seemed to know what her disciple was thinking, and tapped gently on the top of Meiqiao's head and then said, "Come on, let's go in first." Sect leader. As soon as she entered the ancient capital of Shangling Kingdom, Mu Huan, the elder of the Kamasutra sect who had been sent to guard here, greeted him and saluted Su Xiangxue. Elder Mu, you have worked hard. Su Xiangxue smiled at her, then looked aside. Other major sects of the Righteous Alliance and Evil Alliance also sent elders to guard separately to prevent loose cultivators or small sects from sneaking in. Su Xiangxue noticed the representative of the Saint Buddha sect was Weichen. Elder Mu Huan, I didn't expect you to stay in the same place with Zen Master Weichen for so many days without a fight. How did you get along so well? Without a fight? They have fought many times. Before he had time to be happy, Fu Yunzi, the fourth elder of Qingming Sword Sect, said. No one knows how many battles they have played in the past few days. It's just that all nearby mountains are basically flattened by them. Oh? Su Xiangshue's strange way. Then why are they two so honest now? Fu Yunzi looked left, looked right, and then whispered to Su Xiangxue sneakily. Later, Uncle Ancestor came to check the situation and found them annoying, so he beat them both, and said that if they fight again he will join until they don't want to fight anymore. Miss Su, please keep it between us only, don't tell Uncle Ancestor. Don't tell me what? Bai Qiran's voice suddenly rang from behind Fu Yunzi, which shocked him. Nothing, nothing. Fu Yunzi smiled and said. Uncle Ancestor, you can chat with her. I need to go to arrange staying place for the team of Qingming Sword Sect. Bai Qiran stared at his back without uttering a word, making Fu Yunzi get goosebumps. After a while he asked. Did you hook up with Li Pengfei again to sell the publications you created? Fu Yunzi of Qingming Sword Sect and Li Pengfei of Jade Tower had a close personal relationship. This was a piece of information that only several big sects knew. Li Pengfei was famous for his painting skills, and his condensed Tao spirit was also a painting. He has the epithet Saint of Painting in the cultivation world. His paintings could even become living entities acting on their own. Fu Yunzi, the fourth elders of the Qingming Sword Sect, the one in charge of the library, was also an artist. His specialty was calligraphy, which he used to comprehend swordsmanship. The characters written by the sword and the calligraphy skills complement each other. Even his sword looked like a big brush. His epithet was Sword Saint Scholar. Of course, these were not problems. The main problem was that these two friends have a very vulgar hobby. Fu Yunzi's literary talent was extraordinary, but he didn't use it in a righteous way. Instead, he preferred some very lewd articles about the passion of men and women. His writing style was extraordinary, and the things he wrote were thought-provoking and imaginative. Next up, Saint of Painting Li Pengfei would use his extraordinary painting skills to match these things written by Fu Yunzi with vivid illustrations. Two perverts often used this method to earn extra money. Rumors said that their collaborated works have made rich and powerful nobles of the mortal world sought after like crazy, and even in the cultivation world, these things were also priceless masterpieces. Anyway, Su Xiangxue once secretly complained with Bai Qiran, saying that in her pleasure realm, there were many works of Fu Yunzi and Li Pengfei in her collection. Among them, there were even some books that dared to use protagonists based on Bai Qiran. Fu Yunzi was bold enough to name one 1,000-years-old man loses his virginity. Ever since Bai Qiran thrashed him up one time, this guy has never dared to boast about the things he and Li Pengfei had made in front of Bai Qiran. After hearing Bai Qiran's question, Fu Yunzi quickly explained. No, Uncle Ancestor, I swear on Big Brother's honor that I definitely did not sell those things, at least not in this city. Oh really? Bai Qiran sneered and took out a book with the title Shoda A Bai written impressively. It seems that I am your source of inspiration. Fuck. The fourth elder Fu Yunzi opened his eyes wide and looked at the elders of the other sections. In response to his gaze, the elders of the other sects all looked away and acted as if they didn't know him. Don't look around. Bai Qiran snorted, and Fu Yunzi stood at attention subconsciously. It has nothing to do with them, I found this thing by myself. As for you, I will give you 20 minutes to arrange everything, do you understand? Understand. Fu Yunzi nodded sadly and left here dejectedly. It said that 20 minutes later, disciples of the Kamasutra sect and the Heavenly Demon sect witnessed the fourth elder of Qingming Sword sect hanging himself up with a hemp rope on another branch of the tree where Jiyunzi was hung, but this was another story. Seeing Fu Yunzi's lonely back, Su Xiangxue quietly said to Bai Qiran. At any rate, they are still sect leader and elder of your Qingming Sword sect. Are you too disregarding the appearance of the Qingming Sword sect in front of other big sects? No. Bai Qiran gave her a thumbs up and smiled. Before I beat them, I beat the Heavenly Demon sect by the way. Bai Qiran's idea was very bachelor. Anyway, Qingming Sword sect was not the only one that was ashamed. If you do this, won't the Heavenly Demon sect's great elder Huangfu Feng trouble you? No, he couldn't beat me anyway, and when I beat Ji Lingyun, the old boy thought it was a kind of guidance to Ji Lingyun and he clapped and cheered. Su Xiangxue rolled her eyes, then spread her hands and said, "So, you know the rule. Let me handle it for you." Bai Qiuran handed this unhealthy reading to Su Xiangxue, and then the leader of the Kama Sutra sect opened it and read it quickly, evaluating the value of this publication from a professional perspective. 3 minutes later, she closed the book and said seriously, "Well, the skills of Saint of Painting and the literary talent of Fu Yunzi have improved. Mei Qiao, give Sword Patriarch 2,000 high-grade spirit stones." Yu Mei Qiao frowned upon hearing this. As Su Xiangxue's most favored disciple, she certainly knew a lot of her master's secrets. Since Bai Qiuran discovered Fu Yunzi and Li Pengfei's activities, this kind of transaction has been conducted many times. For other reading materials, Su Xiangxue would auction them off in the pleasure realm, and the income would be divided equally between Kama Sutra sect and Bai Qiuran. But when the male protagonist used Bai Qiuran as a template, Su Xiangxue bought it with her own money. Yu Mei Qiao knew what the contents of the stuff in a row on the bookshelf in her master's boudoir were. But of course she wouldn't say it. Instead, she took out the wealth that Su Xiangxue asked her to keep for her from the storage bag, counted 2,000 high-grade spirit stones, and handed it to Bai Qiuran. Bai Qiuran took it and smiled at Su Xiangxue. The eyes of the former revealed the meaning of "cooperate again next time," and the eyes of the latter also revealed that she understood. This scene fell into the eyes of others, and everyone secretly thought it's lovey-dovey. After this private transaction was over, Bai Qiuran coughed, then took out the party who came to meet the Kama Sutra sect, and reached out to Su Xiangxue. Then, "Please come in, ladies of the Kama Sutra sect." Although all the major sects on the scene wanted to occupy this wise immortal mansion by themselves, the ancient city was won by the joint efforts of the Righteous Alliance and the Evil Alliance. Moreover, Bai Qiuran was watching. In this cultivation world, it's necessary to have a heel roll like evil sect in order to maintain the Righteous Alliance's cognition closer to the righteous path in its overall thinking. Nearly 1,000 years ago, the war between righteous and the evil had not yet been carried out. When the evil sects were rampant, these 3 sects left corpses all along their way. Even the most gentle of them, Ghost Spirit sect, there was no grave left in the place where they passed. The fact Bai Qiuran befriended Huang Fufeng, supported Su Xiangxue in the upper position, and established diplomatic relations with the old men of the Ghost Spirit sect, had already limited the damage that the evil sects could cause to the greatest extent. Therefore, Bai Qiuran could not allow the power of the Righteous Alliance to grow uncontrollably, otherwise, the evil sects would be eliminated, and then the Righteous Alliance would inevitably start to rotten from the inside. This was due to the nature of human beings, even cultivators were no exception. So everyone waited for a few days, and when the farthest one Ghost Spirit sect also brought the disciples to gather, the elders of all the sects sent the disciples into the immortal mansion. In the ancient city, the elders of the various sects performed their abilities, either controlling the flying sword or using a piece of clouds, to bring the disciples to the height of several miles on the sky. This was the closest distance they could approach the inverted mountain. Going forward, cultivators above the nascent soul stage would be attacked by the thunder summoned by the mansion, so the elders stopped here. The 5 sects of the Righteous Alliance grouped together, so did the 3 sects of the Evil Alliance. The sky was shining on the side of the Righteous Alliance and was overcast on the side of the Evil Alliance. The elders began to give their disciples one last notice. Bai Qiuran noticed that Zhu Yunzi, with a swollen nose and a swollen face, gave some talismans to Qing Danying, who was standing in front of him with her head high, and Lu Qingyin, who has cultivated for the longest time among the disciples in the nascent soul stage. It's probably mean to protect their lives. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Bai Qiuran also called Tang Ruowei over, and quietly gave her 3 jade slips. This is something that Mystery Academy has just developed based on the Earth Immortal Teleportation Array not long ago. Inside this there is a small space where 3 of my sword beams sealed inside. Bai Qiuran said. If you encounter a danger that can't be solved, throw these 3 jade slips out. Remember, the attack range is 10 meters in radius with the point the jade slips landing as the center. My sword beam doesn't recognize friend or foe, so be careful when using it. Just after he instructed Tang Ruowei and let her go back to the team, Su Xiangxue brought Yu Mei Qiao to find him again. The peerless beauty wearing a veil looked at Bai Qiuran up and down twice, and then pushed Yu Mei Qiao forward and said to Bai Qiuran, "This is my apprentice." Bai Qiuran nodded. "I know. Okay. Su Xiangxue turned her head and said to Yu Meiqiao. If you meet him after entering, follow his instructions. What are you saying? Bai Qiran said seriously. I won't go in. How can I compete with juniors for opportunities? Su Xiangxue gave him a white look and then said to Yu Meiqiao. It is inevitable that what you have encountered some illusions created in the cave. I will teach you a few ways to identify him. When people lived for a long time, they couldn't avoid talking too much. The elders of the sect have instructed the disciples for a long time and finally watched them fly toward the upside-down mountain with their magic tools. Along the way, the mansion's tribulation formation did not respond, and the disciples approached the top of the mountain unharmed. A few meters away from the top of the mountain, space suddenly appeared like ripples. The figures of the disciples disappeared into these ripples as if they had entered another world, and no one could be seen on the upside-down mountain. Seeing that the disciples entered the space of the cave mansion without incident, the elders of the sects present were all relieved. Everyone, let's pull up the barrier. After regaining his gaze, Zhu Yunzi dully suggested. Okay. Ji Lingyun looked unharmed, but he was gasping when he moved. This is the first time in my life that I agree with your bastard's proposal. I want to go back and lie down now. The other sect elders also nodded, and Bai Qiran said at this moment. Wait, I want to go in too. Oh. Su Xiangxue smiled and said. Who just said that he won't compete with the juniors for opportunities? The wind is too big, I can't hear you. Bai Qiran stretched out his voice, drew out his ears and replied pretentiously, and then said seriously. Do me a favor, everyone. Whether I can build the foundation in my life may depend on this one. Okay. Elder Su of Mystery Academy leaned over and handed Bai Qiran a spike similar to the black prism held by the land immortal before. Then. Sword Patriarch, please carry this thing. This is the latest research result copied by Mystery Academy from the materials of the ancient city. It retains the original characteristics while preventing the invasion of souls. This thing is very difficult to make. We currently only have this one besides the prototype. Bai Qiran took it and said. Thank me for the kindness of the Dean Xiu Yuxuan, although I think the land immortal should not be able to invade my soul. After all, I don't even have a deity soul. The elders looked at each other, and then Li Pengfei of Jade Tower said again. Of course we have to help you, but Sword Patriarch, although your cultivation level is low, your strength is superb, will you really not trigger the thunder if you enter? Who cares? Bai Qiran waved. It's not that I haven't struck by lightning before. If I can build a foundation, let alone withstand a bit of thunder, even if there are hordes of immortals in front of me, I will go there. Great. Zhu Yunzi clapped his hands loudly. Then Uncle Ancestor, please depart. Don't say it if you can't say good things. Bai Qiran kicked him away, then looked around and jumped to Su Xiangxue's side. Lend me a foothold. What? Su Xiangxue sighed helplessly, took out the jade music instrument, pulled a string and played it lightly. Hum. The melodious sound floated out, and the water vapor in the surrounding clouds was suddenly gathered and condensed into a 5-meter square thick ice platform, suspended in the clouds. Bai Qiran leaped lightly, jumped from the clouds of the surrounding cultivators to the ice platform, and then pushed slightly under his feet, and his figure suddenly raised. Boom. The ice platform was crushed into small ice crystals by him, while his own body flew high, flying towards the top of the hanging mountain in the sky. Others looked up at him and kept watching him, just like the previous disciple, causing a wave-like spatial fluctuation a few meters from the top of the mountain and entering another world. There is no thunder. After a while, Weichen Master Monk touched his head and couldn't help saying. It seems that this immortal mansion really recognizes that Sword Patriarch is in the chi refining stage. I don't know whether he is happy or sad about that. It's so good, so good. Ji Lingyun and Huang Fu Feng also looked up at the sky. After seeing Bai Qiran's figure disappeared, Huang Fu Feng said to himself. It would be great if our evil alliance also had such a man with low cultivation level but combat power is out of the chart, don't you think? Miss Su, ghostly old man. After passing through the ripples in that space, Bai Qiran came to another world where the inverted mountain peak was located. The gravity suddenly reversed, and Bai Qiran, who was unable to fly in the void without a foothold, suddenly fell straight down. But he had prepared long ago and had adjusted his figure in mid-air. With a bang he landed on the flat top of the mountain and looked up. There was a blue sky above his head and he could no longer see the outside. This is Wise Immortal Mansion. Bai Qiran looked around. No, maybe it should be said the entrance of Wise Immortal Mansion. He figured that he should be at the top of the mountain that was hanging upside down. The top of this mountain was a platform with some vegetation growing everywhere, but no other creatures were seen. Bai Qiran walked to the edge of the platform and looked down. Outside the platform was a cliff formed by a steep slope close to 70 degrees. On the cliff, he could see some trees growing from the cracks in the rock, hanging on the cliff tenaciously. The lower part was shrouded in clouds and mist, and occasionally a glimpse of the energetic glow appeared, but he couldn't see the specific appearance. Seeing no other disciples around, Bai Qiran thought that since they came one step ahead and had already continued to explore, he decided to walk down from the edge of the platform. For Bai Qiran, walking on this nearly vertical cliff wall wasn't different from walking on the ground. Although he couldn't fly as long as he has a foothold, he was definitely much more stable than other cultivators. He only walked a distance of about 25 feet down, then the whole person went deep into the clouds and mist, and a strange sense of spatial dislocation came. Bai Qiran walked for a few minutes under the condition of fog in all directions, and the mist gradually dissipating. HW was stunned to find that he had come to a wonderful cave. I just walked clearly on the cliff. Bai Qiran admired. Land Immortal's spatial manipulation techniques are really dazzling. He looked around and saw that this cave had no way to come out. Behind him was a hard rock wall. Half of the cave's ground and the other half was a bottomless abyss. There was only one narrow road extending to another. On the side of the rock wall there was a dark hole. Beside this passage, Bai Qiran saw a stone monument. When he walked in, blue light suddenly appeared on the stone tablet, forming several lines of text. There are 8 great sufferings in life: birth, aging, sickness, death, association with the unbeloved, separation from the loved, not getting what is wanted, 5 clinging aggregates. Only those who jump out of the sea of suffering can become immortals. TSK, something from St. Buddha sect's books. Bai Qiran said. The Land Immortals have learned a lot. Before he finished speaking, the writing on the tablet changed again. The first suffering, the suffering of birth. As soon as the words appeared, the cave violently vibrated as if it was in the belly of a giant beast, and now the giant beast's stomach was violently contracting and digesting. The rock wall behind Bai Qiran moved rumblingly and pressed against him. The ground that occupies half of the cave under his feet also began to collapse. Only the passage connecting the deep cave on the other side of the cave was still standing in place. There were various signs that showed that it wanted to force Bai Qiran to walk on this path. This kind of persecution was actually not that fatal to other cultivators, but for Bai Qiran, it just hit his sore spot. After all, without a foothold and he couldn't fly in the air, he would fall for sure. Even if the fall couldn't kill him, nobody knew what was under this abyss and how deep it was. If by any chance it fell into the void outside the boundary, that would be terribly unlucky. Okay. Seeing that his foothold was about to disappear, Bai Qiran reluctantly stepped onto the passage. I want to see what tricks you are playing. On the other side, Tang Ruowei, who entered the entrance of Wise Immortal Mansion one step earlier than Bai Qiran, was also looking at the surroundings. Originally, when they came to the summit, the disciples of all the sects were still gathered together, but when the disciples of the various sects entered the clouds and mist under the mountain along the cliff, they were separated, and this also completely disrupted the previous arrangements of the various sect elders. The disciples of the various sects were currently not knowing where they are going. Tang Ruowei estimated that they should have been randomly disrupted and thrown into different spaces. Now she could only go down on her own. Settling down, Tang Ruowei observed the surroundings and found that she was standing in an octagonal pavilion. The octagonal pavilion was floating in a night sky with only a stone tablet in the pavilion. She came to the stone tablet and several lines of text flashed across the stone tablet exactly as Bai Qiran had seen, but immediately after that, the text that appeared on the stone tablet in Tang Ruowei's place turned into the first suffering, the suffering of not getting what is wanted. With the emergence of the writing on this stone tablet, a bridge suddenly came in the depths of the night sky, connecting it to the gap in the railing around the octagonal pavilion. At the same time, the octagonal pavilion also began to tremble, urging Tang Ruowei to go on the next path. In desperation, the girl had to walk on the bridge and head towards the dark night sky. Halfway through, she looked back and found that the octagonal pavilion had disappeared into the night sky. She wondered if it flew to other places or collapsed and dissipated. No longer able to go back, Tang Ruowei continued forward and walked along the bridge to the bottom of a high platform. The platform was several tens of feet high, and Tang Ruowei, who was standing at her feet, could not see the situation clearly, and could only follow the white stone stairs all the way up. When she finally came to the top of the high platform, she found that on the top of it there was a square platform with an area of about 200 square meters. There was a brazier at the four corners of the platform. After sensing Tang Ruowei's arrival, the four braziers suddenly burned. The flame dissipated the surrounding darkness, and then in front of Tang Ruowei, a familiar young girl appeared with her back facing Ruowei. The girl wore a goose-yellow precious palace dress. The style and decoration made Tang Ruowei a little familiar. What is this? She cautiously approached the girl. At the distance of 5 meters, where her moves are the most effective, she asked. Excuse me, who are you? Ha ha ha. The girl she asked gave a chuckle like a silver bell, and then she turned around and faced Tang Ruowei gracefully. Are you asking me? The girl's black hair was like a waterfall, her eyebrows were like a peach blossom, her eyelashes flapped slightly. She was clearly Tang Ruowei herself. The only difference between this girl and Tang Ruowei was that the pair of breasts on her chest was almost world-class boobs. With Tang Ruowei's 20 years of experience, she could tell at a glance that they were genuine and not padded. And when her gaze swept over, the girl put her hands under her chest, seeming to support her chest intentionally or unconsciously. After a dazzling tremor, her breathing stagnated. As the jealous flame ignited in her heart, Tang Ruowei felt that she might have some understanding of what the so-called not getting what is wanted really meant. Bai Qiran was advancing forward in the darkness. After entering the hole on the rock wall, he felt that the road he was walking on became narrower and narrower. Originally, the width that two people could walk side by side after walking for a while, has now become a width that even one person could barely pass. Moving forward, the width of the road shrank again and it had become a dark slit. At this point, Bai Qiran felt that he could only move forward by walking sideways. He squeezed into this crack on his side and moved forward slowly. The rock walls on both sides squeezed towards him, seeming to have an unnatural sense of oppression as if they were trying to crush him. Perhaps people with weird fetishes would like this pressing feeling, but Bai Qiran absolutely disliked it. In fact, if he were not worried about the impact of destroying this cave would affect the entire immortal mansion, he would already start to open the way out. After continuing to walk on this squeezing road for a while, a light finally appeared in front of Bai Qiran, and he also saw the exit, which was simply a vertical crack in the stone. Except for people who have practiced a special technique, to squeeze out from there, even the cultivator would suffer great pain. Bai Qiran sighed. You made me do this. He released his chi and turned his body forcibly in this space with no leeway. His shoulders abruptly opened the stone walls on both sides, crushed the surrounding stone walls. Then he just faced the crack in the stone and stepped out. The stone walls on both sides were forcibly opened by him, and a spacious road that could accommodate one person was created. With a loud bang, a big human-shaped hole appeared at the exit of the crack in the stone wall. Bai Qiran walked out from the inside, patted the dust falling on his shoulder and looked forward. In front of him there was a piece of scorched earth. The ground was cracked and pillars of fire spew out from the cracks from time to time, and space was filled by high temperature, smoke and flames. This fire was not an ordinary flame, at least the fire avoidance technique commonly used by cultivators to be directly immune to ordinary fires was completely unable to resist these flames. After he stepped on this scorched earth, some burning meteors would fall from the sky from time to time. The meteors with billowing flames fell to the ground, causing waves of strong earthquakes and magma eruption. Halfway through, the scenery suddenly changed again. The ground fire disappeared, the once scorched earth now was covered by frost and snow, and the surrounding temperature suddenly cooled down, as if directly entering the room with the lowest temperature air conditioner after walking all day under the big sun. Goose feathers and heavy snow flew in the sky, hail and ice crystals fell from time to time. Just like the flames before, these ice and snow were not ordinary things. Walking in this kind of snow, even cultivators would suffer intense frostbite. So that's it, is this the so-called the suffering of birth? Of course, no matter whether it was cold or hot or the strong temperature difference caused by all this, it couldn't have any impact on Bai Qiran. Instead, he walked and looked at the surrounding scenery thoughtfully as if he was jogging. Here is the pain of cold and hot winds blow on the body when a baby is born, so the previous passage must be a simulation of the pain of passing through a narrow birth canal. Should the next one be the pain of being squeezed by giant hands? Continuing to walk a few miles, Chiron saw the pair of the giant hand that he expected. A beast with long white hairs, who looked like some kind of ape and had a pair of big hands, was standing in the middle of the road. Its height is about tens of feet. Looking from far away, it looked like a white hill. Seeing Chiron, this giant ape roared in excitement, and while taking steps that could cause the earth to shake, it stretched out its big hand and tried to grab Chiron. The giant hand covered Chiron like a sky, but the next moment the giant beast wailed in pain. Every inch of its arms was cracked, like a candy smashed by a hammer. From the broken wound, a huge amount of blue blood flowed out. Because the power it used to capture Chiron was obviously more than the power that an ordinary chi refining cultivator could bear, Chiron counterattacked without hesitation. "Don't touch me with the dirty hands you usually use to touch yourself, wicked animal." Chiron frowned in disgust, then drew an iron sword from the storage bag. After the sword, he threw away the hilt without the blade, avoided the corpse of the giant beast that had been divided into two pieces, and then continued on the road. After the behemoth was killed by him again, the corpse fell to the ground for a moment, but it suddenly decomposed into light and dissipated into the air. Interesting, I thought it was some kind of monster beast native to this space, but I didn't expect it to be an artificial life form. Turning his head to look at the giant beast corpse that dissipated into a light spot, Chiron continued to move forward, full of expectation in his heart. If Land Immortals has mastered so many magical secrets, maybe they could really have a cultivation method that corresponds to his weird physique, which could enable him to successfully build the foundation and truly step into the road of immortality. After passing through the 3 painful trials and the suffering of birth described in Buddhist classics, Chiron finally saw the end of this road. Just a few miles ahead of him, a road stretched forward, leaving the snowy ground and entering a thick fog. But at the same time, Chiron's ears also heard a cry for help. "Fellow Taoist? Fellow Taoist." He looked in the direction where the sound came from and found that among a cluster of ice crystals beside the road, there was a cultivator who was frozen in these ice crystals. Only his head was exposed. "Fellow Taoist, if we are destined to meet here, can you extend a helping hand?" Seeing Chiron looking at him, this cultivator showed a longing look. "I was caught by that giant beast and frozen here. Fellow Taoist, you are brave enough to kill that giant beast. Can you rescue me? If I can come out, I will guarantee in the name of our White Dragon sect that I'll pay you back." White Dragon sect? That second-grade authentic sect in Yong province? While talking, Chiron moved closer to the location of the ice crystal cluster. "The Righteous Alliance has already said you shouldn't come in privately, but you don't listen. This is your own fault. Wait, I will let you out." The trapped cultivator looked ashamed as Chiron walked to the ice crystal cluster. His complexion suddenly changed. A blue light flew out of the ice crystal cluster under him, hit Chiron's body. Chiron stiffened on the spot. Upon seeing this, the cultivator of the White Dragon sect struck lightly and shattered the ice crystal cluster that had trapped him. Then he jumped out of it and walked to Chiron. "How about this method?" The cultivator of the White Dragon sect said to Chiron. "I have said that with this fishing method, 1 or 2 idiots can always be caught. Now that we have found the body for you, we have to find the body for other compatriots." Bait and switch? What a good idea. Chiron nodded at him and suddenly punched out, and when the cultivator had no time to react, he shattered his head. The headless corpse fell to the ground, and a gloomy light of the soul flew out from the corpse, but it was caught by Chiron, and sent to the same place along with the former soul trapped by his incomparable consciousness, a jade pendant temporarily used as its soul prison. After putting away this jade pendant, Chiron glanced at the headless corpse on the ground and whispered, "The White Dragon sect belonged to the Evil Alliance. Improving your acting before laying a trap, you idiot." In a dark space in the deepest part of Wise Immortal Mansion, a rickety figure was sitting in the darkness. He was covered in a dark robe, his hair was sparse, his eye sockets were sunken, his cheeks were deeply sunken as if he was a skeleton covered by human skin. But in his eye sockets, a pair of black eyes were still burning and glowing. In front of him there were countless small screens. The trials of various outsiders in each layer of space are displayed on these screens. At this time, the black-robed man was staring at a screen which showed Tang Ruowei, who was furiously using the techniques that Chiron taught her to frantically beat the girl who was exactly like her. The girl created by the formation of the cave mansion had already been beaten into a bloody mess. At the same time, on another screen, Li Jinhao was carrying a pair of blades, chasing and killing a beautiful white-haired man, slashing his ass. After watching for a while, he withdrew his gaze. These two lucky little girls have basically passed the suffering of not getting what is wanted trial. Originally, what this trial tested was not the combat ability of the testees, but their mental toughness. Therefore, the life form which was created by the formation in this trial did not possess much combat ability. According to the general process, the suffering of not getting what is wanted trial would show to the testees what they wanted the most in their lives, and use various temptations. After allowing them to come into close contact with what they wanted the most, these things would disappear, let them taste the taste of losing the most precious thing, destroy the calmness of the cultivators, and finally lure them into a deadly trap. The calm state of mind of a cultivator was almost closely related to the cultivation base, so if it's impaired, that would cause the cultivation level to regress or even lose their life. When normal people dealt with the thing they wanted the most, they usually treated it with the utmost care and sometimes regarded it as more important than their own life. However, even the designer of this trial would not have thought that there would be people in this world when faced with something that they wanted the most, would attack it first. But for the black-robed people it didn't matter. There were many people in this world, it's reasonable to have one or two cultivators who didn't play by the rules. The black-robed man put all his attention in another screen, on which Bai Qiran had wiped his hands on the headless corpse and walked into the fog. Unexpectedly, there will be such a powerful divergent in the future. The black-robed man's face showed a look of eagerness. If I can possess his physical body, then I... As if sensing what he was thinking now, besides the black-robed man, in a white jade-like skull's eye socket, two clusters of faint blue fire suddenly burned, a voice came from the darkness and it sneered. Are you thinking of possessing his physical body? With your stupidity, that physical body is useless even if you have it. Humph. Hearing this voice, the black-robed man snorted coldly. His lips did not move, but the voice came from his body and asked, "Do you know his details?" "Of course I know. I am the wise immortal who was granted great wisdom by heaven." The light inside the skull's eye was blinked. "But I won't tell you. The crown prince of the sacred dynasty, the dead should sleep in the coffin. Especially you who are a runaway coward." "Ha, wise immortal. What a great name, but now you are just a dead bone with only a strand of the soul remains." The black-robed man sneered. "How do you think your fate is better than me? But I am different from you, crown prince of the sacred dynasty. The deity soul in the skull dangling. I don't have any other desires and I will not use magic techniques to seize other people's bodies. I'm not like you, who are always thinking about the outside world but can only sit here day after day for tens of thousands of years. The phrase not getting what is wanted is more suitable for you than trials." The black-robed man did not speak, but a chilling murderous aura burst out of him, but when he felt the murderous aura, the skull still had no fear. "You can't kill me. My soul has been blessed by heaven and I'm unkillable. What can you do to frighten me?" The black-robed man's chest rose and fell slightly. Obviously he was very angry. But after a while he recovered his calm. "Yes, I can't kill you." The black-robed man's voice was full of sullen anger. "But after I get the body I'll have many ways to deal with you. Then I will make you experience a fate worse than death." Dash. The words were divided into two ends. On the other side, Bai Qiran, who was passing through the dense fog, suddenly found himself back on the cliff of that mountain. Looking back, there was a cloud of mist between the top of the mountain and himself, and he had already crossed a long distance before he knew it and came to the lower cliff. Below him were still clouds and mists. Presumably after entering the clouds, there would be another kind of trial. Overcome the 8 great sufferings of life, get out of the cycle of reincarnation, and step on the path of immortality. This means that I have to go through the 8 great sufferings before I can enter the real wise immortal mansion, right? Bai Qiran looked at the clouds and mist below, then walked on the almost vertical cliff, and continued to walk down a cloud of mist. Anyway, he was brave and bold. Whether he could enter the real wise immortal mansion after experiencing the 8 great sufferings, he has to make a breakthrough first. Passing through the clouds and mist again, there was another familiar sense of spatial dislocation. Bai Qiran simply started to figure out the spatial transmission mechanism in this cloud and mist. Just when he felt that he was about to touch a doorway, the clouds and mist dissipated and he again arrived at a new space. Different from the first space, this time he came to an open-air space. The left and right sides are still bottomless abysses. A stone path that can only be passed by one person extends into the distance, but the sky has gone from black, The lacquered rock wall turned into a yellow and dim sky like the setting sun. There seems to be a prohibition above the passage, which was used to suppress the cultivators who could fly with swords so that they could only move on this single plank bridge with their feet. The sky full of dim light gave people an illusion of aging. Chiron looked left and right and found a stone monument exactly the same as before on a floating stone platform beside the passage, which read, "No matter you are rich or poor, your hair will eventually go white." After a while, the inscription changed again and became 6 characters. The second suffering, the suffering of aging. Aging? Chiron blinked. He was a little curious. How does this immortal mansion let cultivators experience the suffering of aging? Could it be that it has the ability to manipulate time? The lifespan of a cultivator was very long. From the very beginning, the world of cultivation has never lacked the method of prolonging one's life, and even the fact of cultivation itself was, to a large extent, a method created by mankind to get rid of the limitation of life. And those who can come to this cave were definitely cultivators, so in this trial, if you wanted them to experience the feeling of declining mortals, even if you had the ability to manipulate time, removing several decades still wouldn't be enough. Chiron was quite curious about how this trial would show the so-called suffering of aging to the cultivator. He stepped forward and walked along this straight, narrow road. After walking for a while, the yellow sky seemed to be closer to the ground, and it seemed more and more depressed. At this time, Chiron suddenly heard a scream. Chiron felt excited and hurried over, and then he saw that on the narrow road a few miles ahead of him, several cultivators who looked like loose cultivators were attacked from the dim sky. A dense rain of yellow beams of light sprinkled from the sky and fell near these cultivators. Chiron saw that once they were swept by these yellow lights, the vitality of those cultivators would suddenly weaken. Under the influence of, their appearance hasn't changed much, but their hair and beards were slowly turning white as if the end of their lives were coming. After they were hit by the yellow light, they seemed to suddenly become weak, and their hands and feet movements became much slower. As for the people who have been hit by these yellow lights multiple times, this negative state seemed to be superimposed, making their actions more sluggish and their faces even older. Chiron even saw that after being hit many times, a loose cultivator showed wrinkles and age spots that were rarely seen on the face of a cultivator. In astonishment, Chiron suddenly had countless yellow lights falling on his head. He tossed around this road, avoiding countless yellow lights and advancing fast, but because the few loose cultivators occupied the road, Chiron was finally helplessly rubbed by a yellow light in his palm. What? After being hit by the yellow light, Chiron looked at his palm in surprise, because he felt as if he hadn't reacted at all. Seeing that he was hit, several loose cultivators also turned around, and one of them asked in an intermittent weak voice, Why are you okay? You are obviously just a chi refining stage. How the hell do I know? Chiron just wanted to say this, but the next moment, countless yellow lights fell on his head, but after the yellow lights fell into his body, he was still unharmed, and there was no sign of weakening. Nothing happened. After more yellow light enters his body, Chiron also feels its nature. This was not the kind of time manipulation ability as he thought, but seemed to be a mysterious supernatural power that could directly strip the lifespan from other people's bodies. The lifespan was a very mysterious thing, but it did exist. For the cultivators who have not ascended to immortals as well as the mortal, the lifespan of each life would be registered in the book of life and death in the underworld. It's like a secret number that fate assigned to everyone. And this kind of magical power of yellow light seems to be able to cut down the lifespan of a living body, at least temporarily. And this trial, through this special magical power, let people who came here feel the pain of physical aging and the end of life. Then the problem was coming. As a chi refining stage that has lived for more than 3,000 years, Chiron's lifespan has already come to an end long ago. Over the past 3,000 years, although he has relied on longevity pill to prolong his life, he was living in a state of approaching deadlines, and from time to time he has to deal face-to-face with the soul takers who came to capture. This kind of near-death state for him was no different from the usual state. I seem to understand why I am okay. Chiron looked at his palm and muttered. Why? Several loose cultivators asked weakly. Even if I tell you, you can't copy my method. Chiron looked at the sky. This trial doesn't seem to be fatal. Once I find out the details of this mansion, I will come back to rescue you. As for now, work hard and treat it as a punishment for you to enter this cave without permission. After finishing speaking, He passed them and continued to move forward in the eyes of these loose cultivators who were anxious, angry, and pleading. Those yellow lights fell on his head and body like rain, but Baichuran was like a traveler crossing in the wind, his back remained motionless, drifting away in the eyes of the loose cultivators. What is going on? In the dark space, the black-robed man opened his eyes wide, revealing bloodshot irises. He looked at Baichuran on the screen and said in disbelief. Aging magical powers have no effect on him, how can this be possible? He is not an immortal. If Baichuran was quick and could avoid all the yellow light in a passage that only one person could pass through, that's fine, but someone who was completely unaffected by the yellow light, that was beyond his comprehension. Maybe even the land immortals who designed the trial never thought that this would happen. Beside him, the skull stared at Baichuran on the screen, but the light in his eye sockets swayed quietly as if he was thinking. That's it, so he lived so long by this method. The light in the skull's eyes flickered, and there was a voice coming out of it. No wonder the magical powers of aging have no effect on him. Do you know what's going on? Hearing the skull talking to himself, the black-robed man raised it in front of him with magical powers and asked. Tell me quickly. Yeah, I do know. The voice of the skull sounded very flat. But I just won't fucking tell you. Seeing that the black-robed man's consciousness fluctuates violently, the skull quickly added a mockery. I advise you to give up. It seems that the first 4 sufferings of the 8 great sufferings are unlikely to have any impact on him. If you want to possess him, you can only hope that the association with the unbeloved, separation from the loved, not getting what is wanted, or 5 clinging aggregates to be able to drill a gap in his mental defense. Anyway, I think it's quite highly unlikely. Humph. The black-robed man threw the skull aside and said coldly. It's still unknown who's going to die. Life was always full of unpredictable things, just like this black-robed man who seemed to be controlling everything behind the scenes, yet he couldn't expect the face slap of fate to come so quickly. Although he said in a ruthless tone, it's still unknown who's going to die, but it seemed that even heaven was not comfortable with his behavior, and Baichuran immediately slapped him. Just now, he watched Baichuran go through the 3rd and 4th sufferings like a walk. In the 3rd suffering, the suffering of sickness, people who took the trial had to walk in a cloud of epidemics that even could weaken the cultivators, causing their resistance to decline, and experience the torment of illness from various diseases. But when Baichuran walked in it, it seemed as if he had entered a forest with fresh air in the morning. Seeing him walking within the plague cloud, the black-robed man not only inhaled desperately, but his complexion seemed to have become much more refreshed. The 4th suffering, the suffering of death, was the most terrifying and life-threatening trial in the era of Land Immortal. It's basically using the spatial techniques to open up a path to the underworld and make people take a half-day tour to hell. Of course, it's definitely illegal to enter the underworld without going through the formal entry procedures. If these cultivators who were sent to the underworld were discovered by soul takers, they would end up in hell forever. Even if they didn't, the underworld was also full of dangerous miasma, demonic spirits, and ghosts. After Baichuran entered the underworld, he was in another realm, so the black-robed man couldn't see what he had experienced, but when he came out, it seemed like he just visited a friend's house and having tea. This guy even held the horns of a certain creature unique to the ghost world in his hand. When the black-robed man saw him returning to the mansion, he walked like nothing has happened and put the souvenir into his own storage bag. Seeing Baichuran walking into the mist again, the black-robed man was a little speechless. How about it? The skull who was thrown into the darkness sneered and said. What did I say? The black-robed man settled down, glanced at the skull in a gloomy way, then said in a low voice, didn't know whether he's talking to the skull or himself. There are 4 more sufferings. No hurry, no hurry. Tang Ruowei put away the Kuan-Ling sword, pressed down the boiling true qi in her body and took a breath. Since she began to study techniques such as surveying and mapping, she has been sitting in the office and working with people for a long time. After just venting her anger, she has reached the perfection of the foundation establishment stage, and vaguely breaking through to the golden core stage. If Baichuran was here, the black-robed man might not need to rely on the last 4 trials, as there would be an unstable mood. However, the structure of the wise immortal cave mansion separated the master and the disciple, and Baichuran could not witness this precious moment. Tang Ruowei knew that she shouldn't break through to the golden core stage in such a place, so she suppressed the urge of breaking through and looked at the ground aside. Over there was a girl who used to be exactly the same as her but with a pair of plump breasts and a curvy body. That was what she longed for. In countless nights, she dreamed that she had become like that many times, but now by her own hands, her dream body has been transformed into something that must be censored. After looking at it twice, Tang Ruowei suddenly felt a little nauseous. The so-called "in the end all beauty becomes skeleton" in Buddhism was probably like this. If one day she was unlucky and died, maybe her body would become such a terrible appearance. Fortunately, at the next moment, the formation in the mansion began to operate, redecomposing the body into the most basic energy, entering the energy cycle of the mansion again, thus letting the girl stop her endless fantasies. Tang Ruowei walked down the stairs on the other side of the platform. When she walked to the end, a bridge extending to the distance appeared on the edge of the platform suspended in the night sky. Tang Ruowei found that it was connected to a place similar to this platform. From there, another bridge stretched out, and at the end of the bridge was a mist floating in the night sky. This should be an exit. The girl stepped on the bridge and went to another platform via it. She didn't climb up the high platform but walked around the corridor under the high platform towards another bridge. As a result, Tang Ruowei met an acquaintance just after turning a corner. Li Jinyao, dressed in red and holding a pair of blades, stood in the middle of this corridor. A little blood was splashed on her face and blood was still dripping from the blade, and beside her feet, there was also a mess that should also be censored with mosaics. "Senior Sister Li?" Hearing Tang Ruowei's voice, Li Jinyao turned her head, saw her and then smiled. "Junior Sister Ruowei, it turned out to be you. It's a destiny. The pad on your chest is about to fall out." Tang Ruowei was startled and subconsciously checked her chest, but found nothing unusual. When she raised her head, she saw Li Jinyao was having a just as planned smile, and she seemed to relax. "It seems to be the real Junior Sister Ruowei." She smiled apologetically. "Sorry for poking your sore spot, but this is the only way I can think of to verify you. When I came here, I once encountered a situation where my fellow brother wanted to attack me sneakily. Looked like there were many souls of the land immortal in this mansion, waiting for an opportunity to possess our body. Don't know how many disciples have fallen." What is Sister Li talking about? Ruowei doesn't understand what the pad is. Tang Ruowei first denied without changing her expression and then asked. "There is someone who has been possessed." Li Jinyao nodded. "So I said, Sister Ruowei, should we act together? It's good to have a look after each other." Tang Ruowei looked at the object on the ground that was slowly turning into a light spot dissipating, and hesitated. "But to say so. Senior Sister Li, you tried me but I haven't tried you. Yes, if it can build mutual trust." Li Jinyao nodded without fear. "Sister Ruowei, go ahead." "Then what's the matter with this mess on the ground?" Tang Ruowei pointed and asked. "This guy." After taking a look, Li Jinyao sighed. "At this, the suffering of not getting what is wanted, I met a man who met my mate selection criteria in all aspects. I thought I finally meet my destined one, so I wanted to give it a try. Is he stronger than me, strong enough to protect me? Unfortunately, I seem to be too strong, so that guy became like this." "Well, I see you are indeed Sister Li Jinyao." Tang Ruowei shook her head speechlessly. "Let's go together next." After walking through the mist hand in hand, Tang Ruowei and Li Jinyao found that they had appeared together on the steep cliff before. The two girls didn't have Baiqiran's ability to walk like flying on the nearly vertical steep cliffs, but they quickly called out their swords, stepped on them and floated in mid-air. At this time, since the trial has been passed, the two girls were surrounded by a layer of cloud and mist, and could only vaguely see the top and the foot of the mountain. Li Jinyao looked up and down, then suddenly asked. "Sister Ruowei, at this moment, how far do you think it is from the top of the mountain?" When Tang Ruowei heard the words, she narrowed her eyes and looked towards the top of the mountain. Using the experience accumulated in surveying and mapping, she almost measured the approximate distance at a glance. The vertical distance is about 350 feet. As expected. Li Jinyao looked up for a moment and said. "From my point of view, it is about 750 feet. In this way, after every trial, crossing a fog area was equivalent to crossing a distance of about 350 feet. Between the fog areas, there is a gap of 15 feet in height." "But you said it's 750 feet. "Yes, although we are standing next to each other now, we are standing in a dislocation space again, because I have passed one trial more than you." Li Jinyao nodded. "How do the land immortals manipulate this kind of spatial dislocation? I'm very curious." Now curiosity has no results. Tang Ruowei looked down at the misty area. In any case, let's move on, Sister Li. Maybe in the next trial, you and I will be able to meet familiar characters. Let's go. Li Jinyao nodded. Arm in arm, the two girls went deep into the next misty area. After a sense of spatial dislocation, the two came to an expanse of plain. They were surrounded by faintly fragrant grass growing everywhere, and above their heads, the beautiful night sky dotted with stars. This space did not look like a crisis-ridden trial scene, but rather like a classic place for lovers' confession depicted in a novel. What trial is here? Tang Ruowei looked left and right and curious. I don't know, but it doesn't seem like a trial of cultivation level or physical strength. Li Jinyao looked around curiously and said at the same time. Before I meet you, I had experienced the suffering of death. That trial sent me to the underworld. In there I encountered a worm-like behemoth made of bones, which has the power equal to a deity transformation stage. It took me a lot of effort to successfully kill it. Tang Ruowei smacked secretly. I speculate that the first 4 sufferings are aimed at the body and strength, and the last 4 sufferings are aimed at the mental state. This should be one of the last 4 sufferings. Li Jinyao replied. Because we have already passed, not getting what is wanted, 5 clinging aggregates, is very subtle, so this is probably either association with the unbeloved, or separation from the loved. Anyway, find the steel first. Tang Ruowei suggested. Because of the flat terrain, the two girls easily found the trial steel in a corner of the plain, but more importantly, under the steel, they also saw a handsome young man with white hair and white eyebrows, who just stepped out of the ripples of space leisurely. When the two parties met, they were shocked. Tang Ruowei blinked and subconsciously wanted to call master, but Li Jinyao suddenly slammed in front of her and asked the white-haired senior who had a good opinion in front of her, Senior, please use 3 seconds to propose a line of the poem to describe junior sister Ruowei's chest. When hearing the question, Bai Qiran was taken aback for a moment. He glanced at the surrounding plains subconsciously, and then said without hesitation. The stars are shining on the vast flat field. I'm not flat. Tang Ruowei roared, kicked at Bai Qiran's leg, and then squatted down as she hurt her own leg. All right. Li Jinyao completely relaxed this time. He is the real sword patriarch. Why are you here? Bai Qiran touched the small head of Tang Ruowei who was squatting on the ground in pain and asked. I thought the manipulator behind this immortal mansion would not let us huddle together. Anyway, I wouldn't if I were him. Maybe his control over the situation in this immortal mansion is much lower than we thought. Li Jinyao blinked, then smiled and explained the whole story in some of her speculations. So, the trick is multiple spaces misplaced. Bai Qiran thought for a moment. I always feel that someone who can achieve this level of power will not be someone who has the low-level taste of possessing others' body. I think too, but we are not easy to guess at the moment. Li Jinyao said. For example, after many years, a person who was brilliant and talented back then might become an old man who is afraid of death. After all, people will change. Maybe. Bai Qiran looked at the steel. Anyway, we'll understand after we reach the end. Solve this trial first. He pulled up Tang Ruowei who was rubbing her legs, and the 3 came to the steel together. Sensing the arrival of the 3, the text composed of blue light quickly appeared on the surface of the steel. Be happy when meeting new acquaintances, not be sad when parting. The text disappeared, and then 6 large characters appeared. The 5th, 3rd, 2nd, suffering, the suffering of separation from the loved. Wow. Seeing the name of this trial, Bai Qiran stretched the tone and sighed. This trial is beyond my knowledge. Ruowei Miss Li, let me do this trial first. Seeing him deliberately wanting to test the danger for herself and Tang Ruowei, Li Jinyao was taken aback for a while, and then said. With sword patriarch strength, we naturally rest assured. After some contact, whether it's wisdom, talent, strength, experience, or mentality, in all aspects except for cultivation level, Li Jinyao was willing to admit Bai Qiran was her superior. She herself knew that even if she was born in the same era as Bai Qiran, she would definitely be pushed to the fore by Bai Qiran in all aspects. So for Bai Qiran she was more at ease than herself. If even Bai Qiran couldn't pass the hurdle, then she and Tang Ruowei would definitely not be able to pass. Seeing Bai Qiran was going to take the trial, Tang Ruowei, who had been sulking on the ground, also said in a soft voice. Be careful, master. Her words were like mosquitoes' sound, but Bai Qiran heard them clearly. He smiled and patted Tang Ruowei on the head, and then walked forward without hesitation. The so-called separation from the loved, among the 8 great sufferings, refers to the pain of parting from relatives and friends. Baichuran was actually looking forward to it, whether he can rely on this trial to see some old acquaintances in his memory. However, when he walked into the trial area on the plain behind the steel, nothing happened. Great, do even land immortals make counterfeits? After running around in the trial area, Baichuran, who had encountered nothing, walked back again, staring at the trial steel that was glowing blue. Tang Ruowei and Li Jinyao on the other side, as well as the black-robed man who quietly followed Baichuran behind the scenes, also watched this scene in surprise. How could there be no response? The black-robed man in the dark space couldn't help saying. He has lived for so long, hasn't he ever experienced the taste of love? However, most of the mechanisms in the wise immortal mansion were not under his control. At the moment when Baichuran's voice fell, the text on the stone tablet dimmed. How did this thing suddenly turn off? Baichuran patted the stone tablet and shouted to the sky. What's the matter? Do your land immortals products have no warranty? The inscription faded, that is to say, has Sword Patriarch passed the trial? Even Li Jinyao, who was talented and intelligent, didn't understand. But why? Tang Ruowei stared at her master for a few seconds, then suddenly said, "Ah, I get it." Baichuran and Li Jinyao looked at her with questioning eyes. Tang Ruowei paused, pointed at Baichuran and smiled. "Master, you are indeed a man who is single for more than 3,000 years. I didn't believe it when Sect Master Su told me. Now it seems that the title, the legendary loneliest man in 9 provinces and 10 lands, is really not exaggerated." When Baichuran heard the words, he stunned and said, "What nonsense are you talking about? Even so, then I still have my master who is like a teacher and a father to me." "But Grandmaster has ascended." Tang Ruowei blinked and asked. "With Land Immortal's current style of acting, do you think they dare to take the initiative to mess with the immortal realm?" Baichuran was speechless. Seeing his depressed appearance, Li Jinyao thought for a while and stepped into the trial area. She walked a circle along the track that Baichuran had walked. On the way, Tang Ruowei saw that there was fog in the middle, and some people walked out of the fog and said something to her. Among these people, Tang Ruowei also saw Ji Lingyun, the current sect leader of the Heavenly Demon Sect. But Li Jinyao walked past these people calmly, and when the replica of Ji Lingyun tried to stop her, she kicked it mercilessly. When she made a circle and walked back, in her perspective, the text on the stone tablet was also wiped out. "That's it, I understand." Li Jinyao looked at the extinguished inscription and said, "This trial actually evokes the pain you felt when parting with your relatives and friends. In other words, as long as the other emotions in your heart overwhelm this pain, this trial will not be difficult to pass." "That's it?" Tang Ruowei asked. "But Sister Li, why do you kick sect leader Ji?" Because my master, who usually be a single-minded tomboy, suddenly shows a sensational side that can only be found in novels to me. I feel a little disgusting and subconsciously bully her." Li Jinyao replied. "But she's worthy of being a master. I can pass this trial mainly thanks to her." While she was talking, Ji Lingyun, who was far away from Wise Immortal Mansion, suddenly sneezed for no reason. This sneeze twitched her muscles all over, making her wounds caused by Baichuran become painful again, which made her face. "Then I'm afraid it's a bit hard for me to pass," Tang Ruowei said. "Compared with Sister Li, my mental cultivation is absolutely inadequate, and I am not alone like Master. Try it, it's good for training your mind," Li Jinyao persuaded. "Besides, Sword Patriarch is watching here, there should be no danger. Cultivators should cut off the ties with the mortal world. Junior Sister Ruowei, you are only 24 this year, so I think most of your relatives are still alive. This is a good opportunity to fill the loopholes in your state of mind." "Then all right." Tang Ruowei looked at Baichuran hesitantly. "Master, then I will go." Go away, go away." Baichuran's face looked dull. "Go and see your relatives." Tang Ruowei was very angry, snorted, and ran into the trial area with arms akimbo. As soon as she stepped into the trial area, clouds suddenly poured into the surrounding area. Tang Ruowei turned around and found that Baichuran and Li Jinyao were no longer visible. She was a little nervous, but after swallowing she chose to move forward. After walking for a while, the surrounding clouds dispersed, and she suddenly found herself walking on a battlefield. There were corpses all around, countless demons and human races fell to the ground, and there was a chill of true essence floating in the air. On a rock in front, leaned a pretty girl with a black high ponytail. She was wearing a female armor, but she was deeply wounded, and blood flowed down her body and dripped to the ground. Tang Ruowei recognized this dying girl. She was Zui Yanfei from the Heavenly Army, the first friend she met in the Ding Kingdom when she traveled down the mountain for the first time after beginning to cultivate. After returning to the mountain, the two of them often contacted each other by letter and have become close friends. Ruowei. Zui Yanfei, who was caused by the illusion, also saw her and smiled weakly at her. You are here, it feels good to see a friend in the last days of my life. Tang Ruowei knew that Zui Yanfei was a fake, but she couldn't help feeling sad when she saw the miserable situation of her friend. She knew that, as a disciple of the Heavenly Army with the purpose of protecting the human race, Zui Yanfei might fall to this end in the future. Tang Ruowei forcibly resisted the urge to walk over and take a look, burying her head over Zui Yanfei, and continuing forward, the mist rushed over again. This time, it was the aging Emperor Shangshuan who appeared in front of her, lying on the sickbed. Next to him, her younger brother, who had become the crown prince of Shangshuan, and his plump wife, were listening to the last words of Shangshuan Emperor. Tang Ruowei couldn't help but choked up. Compared to Zui Yanfei, this scene was something that was destined to happen in the future. She joined the Qingming sword sect and embarked on the road of cultivation, but the Shangshuan Emperor was just a mortal. In the near future they would part like this. She couldn't help but walked over to the bed, wanting to hear the last words of Emperor Shangshuan. My son, you have grown up and can lead this country. I believe you will make it better. The Shangshuan Emperor coughed weakly, then took her brother's palm and said, The only one I'm still worried about is your older sister. I heard that the Qingming sword sect's technique is unparalleled in the world of cultivation. Then she who has practiced it, has she grown taller? Did she find someone to marry? How high is her cultivation level? Ruowei, has her breasts grown? Snap. Hearing this sentence, Tang Ruowei seemed to hear the crisp sound of the broken string in her head. Endless humiliation and anger swept through her heart in an instant, and the power of anger turned the weak girl who was originally weeping and sighing into a frenzied female dragon. Damned land immortals. What the hell is the illusion you created? The girl roared and shattered the scene in front of her with a palm. Eat shit. In the dark space, the black-robed man stared at a screen, which showed Tang Ruowei, who was madly crushing the illusion created by the separation from the loved trial, and couldn't help muttering to himself. What is wrong with the cultivators of this generation? He looked at Tang Ruowei, who had cut off the head of the Shangshuan Emperor, and muttered, Is there any mistake? Although it is a replica created by the formation, that is also your father. Your biological father. The skull on the side fell into the darkness, watching the scene too. The light in his eyes was indefinite, hiding his thoughts. Oh, she's back. Standing next to the stone tablet, Li Jinyao looked at Tang Ruowei, who came back safely from the trial area, and asked, Sister Ruowei, how do you feel? What else? See her expression. Bai Qiran looked at his disciple's stinking expression and said leisurely, Humph, I think her sore spot has been poked in the illusion. This trial is really asking for a dead end. Because of the dislocation of space, Bai Qiran and Li Jinyao could only see people of all shapes and forms appearing around Tang Ruowei, and then when they watched her halfway, she suddenly madly attacked everything around her, to the point a layer has been peeled from the surrounding ground. But the two of them didn't know what happened in the illusion. Tang Ruowei walked to the stone tablet, stretched out her hand to touch it, and looked at the gradually dimming text on the stone tablet. She suddenly raised her hand and hit the stone tablet with a palm. With a snap, the girl squatted down on the spot, clutching her flushed palm. Puff. Li Jinyao couldn't help but say, Sometimes Sister Ruowei is really dumb but cute. Well, this is the furious state after her berserk button was pushed. Bai Qiran nodded and said, Attack power, defensive power, and speed have increased by 200%, but IQ has decreased by 100%. All three of them have successfully cleared the trial. Bai Qiran walked over, pulled his disciple from the ground, took out the healing plaster and applied it on her palm. At this moment, a mist suddenly appeared on the edge of the plain. This should be the exit to the cliff space. The three of them left the trial space together. After entering the mist, Li Jinyao actively held Bai Qiran's hands. Seeing Bai Qiran looking at her strangely, Li Jinyao explained playfully, I don't want to be separated from you, Sword Patriarch. Seeing that she also held Tang Ruowei's hand at the same time, Bai Qiran didn't say anything. The three of them passed through the mist and returned to the dislocation cliff together. Li Jingyao looked up and down and asked, "Ruowei, look at the top of the mountain now, is it 750 feet away?" Tang Ruowei's anger has disappeared a lot. After hearing this, she looked up and replied, "Yes. It seems that this is the rule. By the way, Senior Sword Patriarch, how many trials have you passed?" Li Jingyao asked curiously. "The next is the 6th one." Bai Qiran replied, "I came here in the order of 8 sufferings, so I think the next one should beat association with the unbeloved. It just so happens that junior sister Ruowei and I haven't passed this level yet." Li Jingyao nodded. "It seems we can go on together." The three of them appeared in front of an old building similar to the Colosseum. They were standing on a platform and the platform was connected to the Colosseum by a bridge. Everything floated in a black void. A stone stele was standing beside the bridge. After the three people walked over, the stele showed 2 lines of words successively as before. "There is an end to the oath of eternal love, and enemies keep running to each other. The 6th, 4th, 3rd, suffering, the suffering of association with the unbeloved. According to this rule, if we go further, we will meet our enemies." Li Jingyao guessed, then asked, "Does junior sister Ruowei have any enemies?" "My enemies?" Tang Ruowei thought for a moment, then hesitated. "If I have to say, then it is probably my ancestor Tang Zhoxia and his henchmen. However, Tang Zhoxia is only a foundation establishment stage cultivator, and his henchmen are just chi refining stage." Having said this, Tang Ruowei glanced carefully at her master, but Bai Qiran was staring at the stele and ignored her. "Then let junior sister Ruowei go first," Li Jingyao suggested. "You shouldn't be dangerous in this way. Sword Patriarch and I are here to watch your back." "Okay." With her master here, Tang Ruowei was very relieved, so after nodding, the girl entered the Colosseum via the bridge. Standing in the same place, Li Jingyao and Bai Qiran, through some gaps in the Colosseum, saw the people Tang Ruowei met inside. It was indeed the former Shangshuan Emperor Tang Zhoxia who had practiced the method of the Blood God sect before, and a group of national guardians led by Sima Yinghua. Tang Ruowei quickly fought with them. The light of the true Qi broke out from inside, making bangs from time to time. In the eyes of Li Jingyao and Bai Qiran, this was a fight where the rookie bullied the newbie. Watching the battle in the Colosseum, Li Jingyao asked, "Does Sword Patriarch have any enemies?" Bai Qiran thought for a moment and shook his head in a daze. "I can't think of anyone." Li Jingyao also said blankly, "The motto of the Heavenly Demon Sect is to take revenge on the spot. But my master is rather unlucky. Her enemy is the head of the Qingming Sword Sect, thus she has never been able to avenge him." They looked at each other. Li Jingyao said, "When we two go in, who will we meet?" "Only heaven knows." Bai Qiran shrugged. The battle on Tang Ruowei's side soon ended. A loose cultivator in the foundation establishment stage, along with a group of minions in the chi refining stage, facing a quasi-golden core cultivator trained by an old monster of a major sect. The result was inevitable. When Tang Ruowei walked out, she didn't even look messy. She crossed the bridge and came to the stone tablet, watching the words on the stone tablet gradually dimming, and then she looked at Bai Qiran and Li Jingyao with thoughtful faces and asked, "Master, Sister Li, what are you thinking?" "It's nothing." Bai Qiran shook his head. "I'm just remembering what enemies I have." "Me too." Even Li Jingyao, who has always been clever and unusual, was a little confused. "I really can't think of anyone who can be called an enemy." "It's useless to just think about it here, just go in and take a look," Tang Ruowei suggested. "Yes, then I will go in first," Bai Qiran said to Li Jingyao. Li Jingyao nodded, and then with a delicate mood Bai Qiran passed the bridge and entered the Colosseum. How is it possible? In the dark space, the black-robed man who was constantly watching Bai Qiran had fallen into deep confusion. A person has lived for thousands of years without a lover. Why doesn't he even have an enemy? What did he do in these thousands of years? This time, after Bai Qiran entered that association with the unbeloved trial, there was still nothing to do. Even Li Jingyao, who followed him, walked in after a stroll. A person who has lived for more than 3,000 years had neither a lover nor an enemy. According to common sense, it's indeed impossible. But what the black-robed people didn't know was that for a person who had become invincible in the cultivation world since 2,000 years ago, it's logical to not have any enemy. Leaving aside the sad topic of love, Bai Qiran did have a lot of enemies in his early years, whether it's people who had a hatred for the Qingming Taoist thus also hated his disciples, or wanted to seize the property of Qingming sword sect, but these people died with the passage of time. The ones that followed were far from Bai Qiran's opponents. If there was a conflict, he usually took revenge on the spot, so how could any of his enemies be alive till now? The same goes for Li Jinyao. Firstly, she has a good temper and was a socialite. Secondly, her talent was superb, so her master Ji Lingyun has protected her very well. Thirdly, she was not weak herself. Following the motto of the Sky Demon sect, if there was an enemy she could think of, she wouldn't let them live until the next day. The black-robed man himself was neither the wise immortal nor the designer of this mansion. He's just a cuckoo which occupied the magpie's nest, thus did not understand the mechanism and design concept of the trial. When the wise immortal created this mansion, he wanted to leave as much as possible the knowledge and property of his era to future generations. The so-called 8 bitter trials were only to test the mental of later generations, so his knowledge would not be entrusted to unworthy people. Of course, such a trial was inevitably dangerous, but the trial itself was not set up to kill people, so people like Bai Qiran and Li Jinyao who had no association with the unbeloved problems would encounter nothing. I don't believe it. After a moment of contemplation, the black-robed man stood up and looked at Bai Qiran on the screen and muttered. You have lived in the world for so long, I don't believe that you don't have anything you wish for. The next trial, not getting what is wanted, will be your downfall. Hand in hand again through the mist, Li Jinyao returned to the cliff and said to Bai Qiran with some regret. I guess we will not be able to continue to conduct trials with Sword Patriarch. Among the remaining trials, 5 clinging aggregates should be the most special, so I guess everyone will meet it only at the end. As for not getting what is wanted, Ruowei and I have already passed it. Then separate. Bai Qiran replied. Originally, the reason why I hid my participation was to let you have your own experience. But I didn't expect to run into the two of you here. I can only say it was a coincidence. Sword Patriarch has a point. Li Jinyao looked a little bit sad but still said. After all, this is our journey. We can't always rely on Sword Patriarch. It's a pity, I want to stay with you for a while and learn more about you. Bai Qiran felt strange when he heard Li Jinyao's words, so he asked. Do you have an addiction to human biography researching? It's really strange. I've only seen this symptom on ancient records of Mystery Academy before. Tang Ruowei sighed helplessly and said. Sister Li, look, he is such a person you should give up. No, Ruowei. A subtle smile appeared on Li Jinyao's face. For me this is a plus. The two girls began to speak profound words that Bai Qiran could not understand. Bai Qiran just wanted to ask a few questions, but Li Jinyao took Tang Ruowei's palm and took a step back, saying goodbye to Bai Qiran. Ah wait. Bai Qiran could only give up and instead began to tell them. Some places in this cave are traps set by the land immortals. If you accidentally fall into it with your mental strength, you're in danger of being possessed. On the way here, I have already met several other cultivators who fell to that fate. Ruowei Miss Li, you too must also be careful. If you are in danger, don't hesitate to use the jade slips I gave you to protect you, do you know? Tang Ruowei and Li Jinyao nodded, and then the two girls held hands and stepped into the lower level of mist with Bai Qiran. After the sense of spatial dislocation came, the fog dissipated, and Bai Qiran realized that he was separated from Li Jinyao and Tang Ruowei. He came to an octagonal pavilion which was suspended in a night sky. Many stars in the night sky exuded dim light, and he didn't know if it was real or not. There was a stele in the center of the octagonal pavilion. After Bai Qiran approached, the stele showed 2 words as usual. People have 7 emotions and 6 desires. The most intense ones are greed, hatred, and unfulfilled wishes. The 7th suffering, the suffering of not getting what is wanted. Not getting what is wanted. Bai Qiran mumbled the verse on the tablet, then muttered to himself. He certainly knew what he wanted. Love, fame, status, wealth, these were all secondary or even unimportant wishes for him. After living for more than 3,000 years, his greatest pursuit was naturally to build a foundation. Xueling said I might find a way to build a foundation here, maybe? Even if he knew that it's likely not in this trial, Bai Qiran still inevitably had a glimmer of expectation in his heart. In the depths of the night sky, a long bridge suddenly appeared, and at the same time, the octagonal pavilion began to tremble unsteadily. Chiron understood that this was a sign that the cave mansion was urging him to move. He stepped on the bridge, went all the way and up the stairs, finally came to the top of a high platform which was tens of feet high. The moment he stepped onto the high platform, the four corners of the square high platform lit up a fire in the four braziers, and the light brought by the fire also illuminated the things in the center of the high platform. Chiron held his breath. In the center of the high platform was a small stone platform on which a bookshelf is carved out of stone. On this bookshelf there was a thick book with a gold wire skin and 4 large characters on the book. Secret Method of Foundation Building. Seeing this book, Chiron even slowed down a lot. He came to the bookshelf lightly and opened the book. This secret book was densely covered with words, but it seems to be pasted with a layer of sandpaper. It's vague and hard to see what was written. Chiron has carefully looked at it for a long time before seeing the gaps in these words. After sorting the words, the whole content of the book was written in 3 words: hopeless, incurable, farewell. It's impossible. In the dark space, the black-robed man's chest, which had been withered for many years, was up and down with anger. He stretched out his skinny palm and slapped it heavily on the ground. With a click, the force of the countershock shattered his arm like a plank of dead wood, but he seemed not to notice it either. Because what happened on the screen was really nonsense. Originally, everything was perfect. When Chiron opened the book, the black-robed man did sense the violent fluctuations in his mood. But just when he was about to use the possession technique, this guy suddenly raised his hand and smashed the book along with the entire high platform of several tens of meters. Through the screen, the black-robed man really couldn't see what was written on the secret book, but he still saw the name of the book clearly. That was obviously a secret method for foundation building. When he was in this trial, he also encountered similar situations. The Wise Immortal Mansion gave him a book that taught him how to make progress in the Land Immortal level. The secret book made him almost uttered. According to the general process, when this situation happened in the not getting what is wanted trial, the Wise Immortal Mansion would use the formation to read the desires of the person in the trial in advance, and then it would search among the various secrets stored in the mansion, extracted the secrets that meet conditions the most, and only show half of them to the one who took the trial. Let their mind be confused and experience the painful taste of not getting what is wanted. For a rough analogy, the mood of the cultivator at that time was probably like those of readers who read a good novel that has been axed, and if they couldn't let go of this unpleasant pain, they would never get out of the trial space. So the problem was coming. From the screen, what Chiron asked for was just a method that teaches people how to build a foundation. Although the black-robed man did not understand why a super-strong cultivator wanted to do everything possible to search for a foundation-building method, he knew that even for the immortal, the mansion contained so many cultivating methods of them, let alone the foundation establishment stage. It stood to reason that the secret foundation-building method that Chiron has in hand should be the best foundation-building method that has been written. After reading it, he should also behave like scratching his head and thinking hard, rather than violently smash the secret book and the trial field to pieces. His reaction was as if something insulting him was written in that book. But how could the mechanism of Wise Immortal Mansion be done? Could it be said that the entire Wise Immortal Mansion, which has housed nearly all the wisdom of an era, could not find a foundation-building method for him? The black-robed man felt that he was having a brainstorm, and his whole thoughts became a mess, faintly sighed. "Father, my heart hurts." There was a smirking laugh from the skull head in the darkness nearby. The black-robed man calmed down, gave a cold snort, raised his hand and took it back to his hand. Immediately afterward, he moved his decayed body with great effort, pinched a magic seal and dissipated in a thick fog. Like the black-robed man, Chiron's mood at this moment was also very painful. The sore spot for 3,000 years was once again frantically taunted by an illusion, but fortunately as the secret book was destroyed, he automatically passed the not getting what is wanted trial. Besides the floating platform that Chiron broke, a bridge that connected to another platform appeared. Chiron made a stinking face and stepped onto the bridge. After 2 steps he thought about it, turned back and kicked the floating platform he just left. With a loud bang, the platform floating in the night sky flew out like a rocket launched and sank into the depths of the night sky. After venting his anger, Chiron calmed down, he swaggered into the mist from the bridge and left the space. Back on the cliff, Chiron found that he was close to the bottom of the mountain. Only a thin cloud and mist remained in front of him. Through this cloud and mist, Chiron could even see the place below the cloud and mist. There was a land covered with green, and many pavilions, towers, palaces, and halls were built on the ground. Next, it should be the last suffering, 5 clinging aggregates, right? Chiron touched his head. What kind of trick does this stupid immortal mansion place in the last level? Why do I always feel as if I'm going to gain a lot of treasures? Just thinking about it couldn't help him figure out. Chiron remembered the weird result of the 3 previous trials, so he decided to rely on his own, and recklessly walked straight into the fog. What came this time was not the sense of spatial dislocation that was transmitted to other dimensions as before, but the feeling of gravity flipping that he experienced when he first entered this mountain. Walking in the mist, Chiron suddenly saw that the earth under the mountain peak was suspended in the sky again. Those pavilions and towers had all become floating islands, and the earth had become a sea of clouds. The mountain also hangs upside down as if it were seen from the outside world. Chiron walked through the clouds and found himself in front of a tall heavenly gate. Behind the heavenly gate was a long corridor carved with white jade, which connected the floating islands in the sea of clouds. It looked like a scene from the immortal realm in the legend. He stepped back a little and looked up at the heavenly gate. Above the heavenly gate, somebody had carved out the 4 characters with a majestic pen. The 5 clinging aggregates. Everything was as Li Jingyao and he had guessed. This last level was different from all other trials before. The so-called 5 aggregates were the aggregation of the 5 physical and mental factors that took part in the rise of craving and clinging: form, feeling, perceptions, mental activity, and consciousness. According to Buddhism, when a person lived in this world, everything they heard, saw, thought about, encountered, and sensed would bring suffering to them. Their existence itself was suffering. But that was a Buddhist view, and the land immortals would certainly not fully agree and accept it. Not to mention the land immortals, even Chiron would not agree with this view. Life was indeed full of pain. For example, Chiron has not been able to build a foundation for 3,000 years. Whenever he thought of this, he would feel pain in his heart. Tang Ruowei was born with no curve. When she sees other people of the same sex with big breasts, she would be very painful. But if there was only pain in life and nothing else, then what was the meaning of living in this world? Was it better to die? The Buddha said that everything was suffering, but there was another term called happiness and suffering. To say that in this trial, it's possible that the only common point of view among land immortals, Buddhism, Chiron, and cultivators was that the cultivation was necessary to change their lives. But he just didn't know how the immortal mansion would express this view. With this question in mind, Chiron stepped through this heavenly gate and entered the cloud corridor carved with white jade. Within 2 steps, the sky dimmed suddenly. The white jade corridor that Chiron is on was walking from low to high. It looked like he's walking from cloud to cloud. Therefore, above him there were many higher clouds. But at this moment, these clouds gathered towards him, sieged the white jade corridor, and there was a faint muffled thunder sound came. As Chiron moved forward, the thunder sound became louder, then a bolt of lightning passed through his head, traversing the 2 clouds on his left and right. Chiron saw the thunder and lightning and calculated its power. It was not ordinary natural thunder and lightning, not even the normal lightning created by spells, but the thunder of heavenly tribulation, which specialized in vanquishing the cultivators. That lightning bolt was like a signal of the beginning. After it, several tribulation lightning bolts passed above Chiron's head back and forth. The nearest one was only a dozen meters away from the top of his head, and he could even smell the smell of the air after ionization. Then there were winds and rains again, countless violent storms, and a little hail during the period as if to accompany thunder and lightning, and the wind blew back and forth between the 2 clouds. And in this violent storm, the first stage of this trial finally revealed its scale claws. Between the lightning and thunder, a thunderbolt suddenly shot towards Chiron's face. He stretched out his hand to pat the electric light away and looked in the direction where the thunderbolt came from, only to see a dark shadow flying through the clouds. It kept circling around him and then stuck the head out of the clouds in front of him. That was a huge serpent. The head alone was probably close to 10 feet long. The rest of its body was hidden in the clouds, was dimly obscured, thus it's impossible to see the specific size. There were already 2 bulges above its eye sockets, the sign of the imminent transformation of the dragon. A pair of huge wings stretched out from the clouds, overwhelming the sky, countless electric lights jumping on the azure blue scales. It looked extraordinary. Yarn Chinese website. This was a strange beast that even Bai Qiran has never seen before. Maybe it had the bloodline of an immortal beast, but its eyes look a little dull, so he doubted that it may not be a living creature. This winged giant serpent opened its big mouth, and a thunderbolt with the thickness of a bucket spouted from its mouth, shooting at Bai Qiran with a terrifying power comparable to the full power blow of a deity transformation stage. With a clank sound, the thunderbolt suddenly split into two from the center. Then the serpent's head was also split into two as if it's cut off by the invisible sword. The head fell on the white jade corridor, smashing a long section of the handrail, while the remaining of its huge body fell into the clouds and disappeared. Bai Qiran threw away the hilt in his hand and walked forward. After its death, the head of the giant snake was slowly turning into light, but this time when its head dissipated, there was some object fell to the ground and shone. Bai Qiran picked one up and found that it was a top-grade spirit stone. Wow, this monster can even drop money, awesome. Bai Qiran said in surprise. It deserves to be the mansion of the land immortals. With such high technology, what will I find out later? He thought for a while, collected the spirit stones and then continued to move forward. After walking for a few more miles, the altitude of the white jade corridor gradually increased, and the stormy clouds gradually disappeared. After passing through another decorative small gate, Bai Qiran saw a familiar figure. The person turned his back to him, standing on a platform in the cloud, dressed in pure white. Although only seeing her from the back, Bai Qiran also recognized her identity. Su Xiangxue, or rather, a phantom created with the Su Xiangxue in his memory as a template. As he approached, the woman turned his head to look at him, her picturesque beauty, with a charming little mole under the corner of his eye, indeed Su Xiangxue's beautiful face. It seemed that after the mansion suffered a failure in the separation from the loved trial, this time, it directly extracted the most beautiful and aesthetically consistent image of the opposite sex he had seen in his memory, and used it as a trial. Bai Qiran and Su Xiangxue looked at each other for a while, then he commented. Su Xiangxue is much more beautiful than you. Her charm is natural. Compared to her, you are like a mass-produced doll. I give you a 1-star review. Of course, only Bai Qiran could talk that way. Su Xiangxue's beauty alone, even without the bonus from her technique, was enough to make many unscrupulous cultivators mentally confused, but this mansion has underestimated the 3,000-year-old legend of loneliness. Bai Qiran's old virgin mentality directly shielded Su Xiangxue's appearance. Not all women were like Su Xiangxue, but a very few men were like Bai Qiran. No matter how he reacted, the Su Xiangxue created by the mansion's formation still followed her established procedures. Seeing Bai Qiran, she suddenly showed a poignant smile, and then turned to the edge of the platform looking very distressed. This scene also touched Bai Qiran very much. He shouted, "Wait a minute." Su Xiangxue ignored him, so Bai Qiran chased after her, took her arm, then lifted her up. With a bang, Bai Qiran kicked Su Xiangxue down from the platform without mercy. "I'm glad to help you." Seeing Su Xiangxue falling into the clouds, Bai Qiran, standing on the edge of the platform, said with a smile. However, neither the real person nor this Su Xiangxue was a character who was willing to let go so easily. After being kicked down the cloud by Bai Qiran, her body suddenly sank just like a deflated doll, until it became only one piece of human skin and 3 black holes, flew back to the platform by the wind and then rolled towards Bai Qiran. Backhandedly tearing this human skin apart, Bai Qiran suddenly felt a heartfelt joy when looking at the few shiny high-grade spirit stones falling out of the human skin. He picked up the high-grade spirit stones on the ground and counted them, and found that the number dropped was much higher than that of the giant snake before. It seems that the 5 clinging aggregates should be the previous 7 trials with ready-made entities, and the monsters will drop spirit stones as energy sources, and the monsters that appear in later level will drop more spirit stones. Bai Qiran murmured. In the end, the final trial still depends on whether the fist is hard or not. It makes sense, no matter how high the level of cultivation is, no matter how good the understanding is, if you don't have the strength to resist the heavenly tribulation, you will still fall in the last level. But, I care about another thing. How many spirit stones will be dropped in this trial? He collected the spirit stones, then took out a new iron sword from his storage bag, and flew towards the upper level of the corridor. In the deepest part of Y's immortal mansion, at the end of the white jade corridor, above the palace built by imitation of the heavenly palace, The man in black robes was sitting on the large dragon chair in the middle of the hall, watching Bai Qiran's every move through the screen. In his view, Bai Qiran was advancing like an unstoppable storm. The enemies he encountered along the way, whether it was an intangible giant made up of epidemic clouds, or a terrifying monster that came from the underworld, all were killed in one hit. The stronger Bai Qiran's performance was, the more eager the black-robed man stared at him. "I really want this perfect body," he muttered unconsciously. "If I can enter this body and become one with him, whether it is to recreate the sacred dynasty, to regain the wilderness, or even fight for supremacy in the immortal realm, I can do it all." The skull on the side laughed at him and said, "Enter this body and become one with him, huh? I didn't expect the last royal descendant of the last unified sacred dynasty of the human race is actually gay. If your ancestors knew this, they'll be mad enough to rise from the grave." But at this time, the black-robed man's attention was all focused on observing the physical power of Bai Qiran. His power, his speed, his ability to react, and his physical strength, everything made the black-robed man so fascinated that he even ignored the mockery of the skull. Once he made up his mind and made a breakthrough, Bai Qiran, who had turned off his curious mode, was naturally fast. After only a few minutes, he reached the door at the end of the 5 clinging aggregates trial. Seeing this, the black-robed man also hurriedly triggered the prepared speech on the stone tablet at the end of the level. At this time, Bai Qiran, who was standing outside the hall, also saw the words emerging from the stone tablet. "Congratulations, the strong man who passed the 8 trials, your mental aptitude is enough to ascend the immortal way. Open the door of the hall, and accept the inheritance of wise immortal." Bai Qiran's footsteps paused, and then the man in black robe saw him slowly walking to the door of the hall. At this moment, the two were only separated by a door. As long as Bai Qiran opened the door and came in front of him, the black-robed man could surprise Bai Qiran in one fell swoop. He believed that with his spiritual will to live for tens of thousands of years, Bai Qiran, a man who had only lived for a few thousand years, would definitely not be his opponent. "Come in. Open the door." The black-robed man looked forward to seeing Bai Qiran's every move through the screen. But after Bai Qiran stood for 2 seconds, he suddenly untied the storage bag on his waist and poured out all the high-grade spirit stones he had obtained from this trial, counted it up one by one. The black-robed man felt his anger rise, but he still suppressed it, and patiently waited for Bai Qiran to finish counting. Bai Qiran's movements were very slow, just like a child who has just learned how to count. When he finished counting and put all the spirit stones back into the storage bag, the black-robed man finally breathed a sigh of relief. But before he could finish his breath, he saw Bai Qiran at the door shaking his storage bag and then turned back without hesitation. "What?" The black-robed man stared blankly as Bai Qiran's figure went further and further away, and had no reaction for a long time. After a while, he hammered the handrail bitterly and began to yell, "You are crazy. The final boss is sitting here. You finally killed all the monsters in front. What are you going to do now? Come and kill me, come face me. Wise Immortal's treasure is right in this hall." But no matter what he shouted, Bai Qiran couldn't hear him, because his figure had been submerged in the sea of clouds, and he had returned to the previous cliff. Standing on the cliff, he paused for a moment, then turned his head and rushed back into the mist, passing through the heavenly gate, stepping on the white jade corridor, and finally encountered the monster in the original place. Although the monster this time was not the winged giant snake, after Bai Qiran slapped it to death, he found that the same amount of high-grade spirit stones had fallen out. "I knew it." He held the top-grade spirit stone on the ground in his palm, looked at the light above intently and smiled. "The monsters here will respawn and the spirit stones will drop again, so the next thing to do is clear." He looked at the white jade corridor and uttered 5 words firmly. "I fucking maxed out." About 5 days later, Li Jinyao emerged from the mist. She was the first to cross the 7 trials after Bai Qiran, and came to the last cliff. As soon as came out from the mist, she keenly smelled a unique smell. "Strange, is someone forging a weapon here?" As Li Jinyao was talking, she looked forward, and then she saw Bai Qiran sitting on a nearly vertical cliff and refining a magic tool. "Senior?" Li Jinyao was surprised. "What are you doing here? Are you unable to overcome the last trial after such a long time?" "Ah, it's Miss Li." Bai Qiran turned to look at Li Jinyao, but he seemed to be in a very good mood. He replied, "No, I just refined 2 more storage bags because the ones I brought with me are about to be filled by rewards." "Reward?" Li Jinyao blinked, stepped on the back of the sword and lightly descended to Baichuran's body, then leaned forward and asked with her hands on her back. What exactly is going on? Baichuran explained in detail what he had encountered during the 5-yin fiery trial, and then Li Jinyao immediately asked without thinking. Senior Jianzu, can you take me with you? It seems you understand why am I staying here. Baichuran smiled and nodded. Do you know surveying and mapping? Yes, I do. Li Jinyao nodded. But this time I put a lot of pills and talisman in the storage bag, so I didn't bring the tools for surveying and mapping. Don't worry about that, Ruowei must take these things with her. Baichuran got up and said. Let's go. Leave the battle to me, your job is to find the formation node. Hey. When the two walked into the mist one after another, Li Jinyao jumped slightly and grabbed Baichuran's hand from behind. Considering the possibility of space transfer, Baichuran pulled Li Jinyao and walked into the mist. When the world in front of the two turned upside down and the heavenly gate appeared before and behind his eyes, Baichuran gently pushed Li Jinyao's soft palm away and said, Let's go. Oh. Li Jinyao was slightly disappointed but still followed Baichuran. The two moved forward and soon encountered the first monster. A giant insect bound by the corpses of countless dead people flew out of the whirlpool in the clouds, spraying a strong death miasma towards them. Both were smart people so they could cooperate without saying. Baichuran raised his hand to block, while Li Jinyao began to concentrate on searching for the nodes of the formation. Over there. Li Jinyao quickly found the nodes of the formation in the clouds. Made a slash with her blade and separated the sea of clouds. In the sky behind the sea of clouds, a part of the complicated formation suddenly appeared. Looking at the formation map engraved on the sky, Li Jinyao blinked and turned to Baichuran. This image of the formation can't be remembered just by memory. Sword Patriarch, please kill it. Baichuran casually used a palm to crush this huge monster, and then Li Jinyao explained. I think we should find out the locations of these formations first, and when junior sister Ruowei comes over with the surveying and mapping tools, we will use the surveying and mapping method to rub the formations that can produce high-grade spirit stones. That's right, the reason why Baichuran went back and forth to this trial but didn't pass it, in addition to farm spirit stones, was to wait for someone who could record this formation that could produce high-grade spirit stones and bring it back to research. Baichuran knew that behind the hall door, it's highly likely that the land immortals were waiting for him. When he walked outside the hall for the first time, his mind awareness had already felt the violent mind awareness from inside the hall. When he approached the gate of the temple, that mind awareness was emotionally like a roller coaster. The guy in the hall could not have imagined that the strength of his mind awareness could reach the level of penetrating the hall with the defensive enchantment, so he sat there in such a stately manner. Even though he could clean up the enemies inside, he didn't know what tricks those enemies have. In case he pushed them too hard, they may use some desperate methods, which could destroy the formation or even the entire mansion. Not to mention these methods, if Baichuran accidentally hit those formations once or twice during the battle, that would be terrible. This formation could make spirit stones on its own, unlike the formation that made spirit stones by gathering spiritual energy. With this formation, the cultivation world would have infinite resources of spirit stones in the future. Spirit stones had many effects, assisting practitioners in their cultivation, being used as the power source in formations, forging, and other creations. The cultivation world used spirit stones as basic currency because of their crucial role. Currently, the number of cultivators in the world was still relatively small, and the reserves of spirit stone or that can be mined were still enough. But no one could guarantee that after the further development of the cultivation world in the future, the spirit stones would not exhaust. Only with the improvement of production capacity could the world of comprehension develop further. After the war between humans and demons, the human race could establish a unified and prosperous dynasty of cultivators. The role of this technology was definitely indispensable. Baichuran took Li Jinyao all the way up and cleared all the monsters they encountered on the way. Li Jinyao was responsible for finding the hidden node of the formation. After some efforts, the two spent about a whole day and successfully located all the nodes of all formations in this trial. In addition to the formation of creating high-grade spirit stones, there were formations that create monsters and the formations that summon thunder, all of them densely mixed together to form an extremely complex formation. Now they could only use the simplest method to print all this up, then slowly analyze the results after bring it back. After finding all the nodes of the formation, the two followed the way they came back to the cliff. As soon as he stood firmly, a few people shuttled through the mist above. The front is the last level, cheer up. Qing Danying leaned out of the fog and was saying some words of encouragement to someone behind her, then she turned her head and saw Bai Qiran. This little girl was stunned for a while, and then a vigilant color appeared on her face, loudly saying, "Be careful. It seems that the association with the unbeloved trial is not over yet. Damn thief, see my move." While talking, she rushed towards Bai Qiran, her palms stretched out and released a large emerald-green sea of fire. Bai Qiran pulled Li Jinyao to behind, then stretched out his hand, directly grabbed Qing Danying's back neck, and lifted her out of the flames. The emerald flame hit Bai Qiran's face, and then was divided into two halves, like a torrent blocked by a rock, leaving a large blank area behind Bai Qiran. "Let me go." Qing Danying was constantly thumping in Bai Qiran's hands. Her posture was like when Bai Qiran was holding her wings hundreds of years ago when she was a chicken. But this time she seemed to have two helpers. Hearing Qing Danying scream, two attacks suddenly appeared in the mist. Bai Qiran was familiar with these two attacks. One of them was the Ecstasy Bone Palm in Su Xiangshue's Phantom Charm, and the other was a sword beam, which came from the Qingming sword sect, a move that he had taught Zhu Yunzi long ago. Bai Qiran raised his palm and reached out to stop it. The sword beam and the insidious palm were reflected to the side of the cliff, and a large area of the cliff was cracked. Two figures came out of the fog, but they were Su Xiangshue's disciple Yu Meiqiao, and Zhu Yunzi's new apprentice, a dull young man named Lin Fan. After seeing that Bai Qiran was the one who subdued Qing Danying, the two of them obviously froze for a while, but the next moment Lin Fan took the lead, and the metal flying sword in his hand splits into countless sword beams and flew towards Bai Qiran. The light of the sword flying in the sky was exactly the sharp golden sword technique of Zhu Yunzi. Looking at its power, Lin Fan has clearly practiced it to the last level. Bai Qiran saw it and used his finger as a sword, using the same sword technique to fight with Lin Fan. A bit of sword beam gleamed at his fingertip, and the sword beams created by Bai Qiran and Lin Fan leaped back and forth in a 3-foot square circle space around them, making a jingle and clear sound. Between the attacks, Bai Qiran looked calm, while Lin Fan's expression became more tense, cold sweat oozing from his forehead. The attribute of metal is ever-changing, so the essence of sharp golden sword technique is rapid and endless change. You have to move from the angle that the enemy can't expect, and in a way that the enemy can't expect. Bai Qiran clamped Lin Fan's flying sword with two fingers and said, "You are still lacking skill, ask for guidance from your master after you go back." After that, he spun his wrist and easily disarmed Lin Fan's sword. At the same time he hit Lin Fan's chest with the hilt of the flying sword and knocked him back. But at this time a figure came again, and Yu Meiqiao moved with elegant and charming footwork like a dance step, stretched out her hands and attacked Bai Qiran's two vital points. Her move was like a lover's embrace, but it hit a cold killing intent. Seeing Yu Meiqiao's movements, Bai Qiran hesitated a little, then grabbed her wrist backhandedly and grabbed her with a standard grappling. Although he could do all Phantom Charm's moves, after all, this was a technique for women to practice. If it's performed by a man, that would be an eyesore. Your footwork is good, but your moves are too artificial. Holding Yu Meiqiao with one hand, Bai Qiran also commented, "Like your master, when she used it, I didn't know if she really asked for a hug or wanted to kill someone." Yu Meiqiao struggled, so Bai Qiran let her go and threw Qing Danying out by the way. At this time, Lin Fan picked up the sword and wanted to continue to attack, but Yu Meiqiao stopped him. "There is no need to fight," she said. "This is the real thing. Hello, master's husband." Bai Qiran glared and asked, "Little girl, who is your master's husband?" "Of course I am calling you. Based on the love of my master and you, isn't it obvious? Or am I too far-sighted?" Yu Meiqiao said with a smile. "You misunderstood." Bai Qiran waved his hand hurriedly. "I don't have that kind of relationship with your master." "It's not that kind of relationship, no, but that don't mean that it won't develop into this kind of relationship in the future, right? So why can't I call you that in advance?" Yu Meiqiao said wittily. "Furthermore, the master is almost 1,000 years old, and she is still guarding his virginity. Being the leader of the Kamasutra sect, it is too unreasonable." "Huh? What?" Bai Qiran blinked. "Su Xiangxue is still a virgin? Are you lying to me?" Of course it is true. When I was a kid, I took a bath with Master, but I saw the virgin mark on her body with my own eyes. Yu Meiqiao asked. Besides, what good is it for me to lie to you? Bai Qiran wanted to say that the bitches of your Kama Sutra sect always like to deceive honest people like me, but after thinking about it, Yu Meiqiao happened to be a junior of a friend, so he shouldn't say that to her face. Seeing that Bai Qiran didn't believe it, Yu Meiqiao continued to ask. So let me put it another way. Master's husband, you and my master have known each other for nearly 1,000 years. Have you ever seen or even heard of her going out to find a man for such a long time? Bai Qiran thought for a while. It seems, isn't it? But the phantom charm that I modified for her still needs a man's essence to practice. If she doesn't pick up a man, from where did the essence come from? It doesn't mean she has to collect it herself. Yu Meiqiao rolled her eyes. Don't you remember why does my master betray her own master? What you said seems to make some sense. Bai Qiran showed a look of suspicion, and then said suspiciously. But what does Su Xiangxue want? Chastity reputation? Since she decided to take over the Kama Sutra sect, she mustn't care about it. Of course it's for you. Yu Meiqiao said seriously. Although the master does not say anything, she has been devoted to you for hundreds of years. Upon hearing this, Bai Qiran was a little surprised. Qing Danying said, I didn't hear anything, and then pulled the dull Lin fan aside. Li Jinyao, who was next to him, puffed up her mouth and muttered. Senior, I am also a virgin. Oh. Bai Qiran was still in a state of astonishment, and replied subconsciously after hearing this. What does that matter to me? Puff. Yu Meiqiao didn't hold back a smile for a while, and then said to Li Jinyao sternly. Hey Sister Li, I respect your cultivation level, but please be more reserved. Come first, served first. My master has been waiting in line for hundreds of years. Please respect your seniors. Li Jinyao curled her mouth and muttered in a low voice. No one knows the future. Master, I can only help you here till this point. Seeing that Li Jinyao had chosen to retreat temporarily, Yu Meiqiao smiled slightly and thought. Ahem, all right, let's talk about the main business. Bai Qiran stood up. In order to conceal his embarrassment, he stretched out his hand to open a hole in the cliff, and then let all the people go in and rest. Taking advantage of this time, he also told Qing Danying, Lin Fan, and Yu Meiqiao about the last trial and let them rest well. After they recovered, he took them to the last trial to farm the spirit stone. The other 3 people quickly began to settle down, and Li Jinyao entered into a state after a little awkwardness. Bai Qiran came to the opening of the cave, sat cross-legged, and then sighed while looking at the mist that stretched outside the cave. Today I really learned a piece of shocking news. I am afraid that most people in the cultivation world can't believe that the leader of the Kama Sutra sect, the biggest boss of the sex industry in 9 provinces and 10 lands, is actually a virgin. What shocked him even more was that after learning the news, there was an uncontrollable gleam in his heart. What am I happy about? He said to himself. I'm a fool. 2 or 3 days later, when Bai Qiran and others returned to the cliff to rest, Bai Qiran's disciple Tang Ruowei finally walked out of the mist. Next to her was Zui Yanfei, who was also one of the heavenly army disciples that were chosen to enter. In short, these 2 very girls fatefully gathered again. And because of the jade slip given by Bai Qiran, this time it's Tang Ruowei who took Zui Yanfei through the trials. When seeing Bai Qiran and others still here, the 2 girls naturally acted very surprisedly. Tang Ruowei held Zui Yanfei back in his hand and came to Bai Qiran cautiously, looking at him suspiciously. What are you doing? Do you doubt me again? Seeing Tang Ruowei's appearance, Bai Qiran knew what this girl was thinking. He said lightly. Would you like to hear another poem about your chest? No need. Tang Ruowei resolutely refused. I have my verification method. She fetched a jade slip from the storage bag on her waist, and then said to the others. Regardless of whether you are true or not, please keep a little further, for the sake of your safety. The other people looked at each other, then Qing Danying took Lin Fan, and Li Jinyao took Yu Meiqiao flying up and avoiding them far away. Zui Yanfei also stepped back a lot and then watched Tang Ruowei shouted and threw the jade slip in her hand towards Bai Qiran. With a bang, the jade slip touched Bai Qiran's forehead, and then suddenly shattered. From it burst out infinitely white sword energy, filling the surrounding space of 10 meters, created a pillar of light penetrating through the clouds, even created some small black space cracks. A vast number of sword beams shuttled, covering Bai Qiran who was standing in the center of the explosion. Afterward, the sword energy converged, and a smooth circular pit with a radius of 10 meters appeared on the cliff. The wall of the cave was flat and smooth. Bai Qiran appeared in the original position unharmed and then fell with gravity. Li Jingyao used a spell, stretched her black hair and wrapped around Bai Qiran's waist and hung him up. Tang Ruowei breathed a sigh of relief when she saw this. It seems this is the master himself. Yeah, if you can throw the jade slip that I gave you on my face without hesitation, you must be my unlovable disciple. Bai Qiran sighed. I met a land immortal impersonating Sister Li before and almost be tricked. When she finally showed he true color, I used the jade slip you gave me to destroy her. Tang Ruowei said. After all, if you were fake, I would have eliminated a great enemy, and you are real, it would be useless. I still have one in my hand. Bai Qiran was in the air, dangling from Li Jinyao's black hair, and then was placed on the ground. Standing firmly at the entrance of the cave, Bai Qiran waved to Tang Ruowei and Zui Yanfei. Come in, unruly disciple, I'll tell you about this final trial. Spending a few minutes, Bai Qiran briefly explained to Tang Ruowei and Zui Yanfei and then asked. So, did you bring surveying and mapping tools? Of course, I always carry it. Tang Ruowei replied. Good. You take a rest first and then I will take you to the cave. Bai Qiran touched her head. After entering, I'll stop the monster. You and Miss Li will be responsible for recording the formation. Tang Ruowei nodded, and walked aside with Zui Yanfei, preparing to adjust her breath to restore her true qi. Bai Qiran also stepped aside and began to teach Lin Fan how to practice the sharp golden sword. At this time, Tang Ruowei suddenly heard Li Jingyao next to her calling her in a very small voice. Ruowei, come here. She looked at Li Jingyao and found that the genius of the heavenly demon sect winked at her. Tang Ruowei stood up and walked aside with her, while Zui Yanfei glanced at her strangely, but did not stop. After all, Bai Qiran was here. Even if Li Jingyao belonged to the demon sect, she would not dare to do anything to his precious apprentice under his eyes. Following Li Jingyao to a corner deep in the cave, Tang Ruowei saw her stop, so she asked. Sister Li, what are you asking me to do? Li Jingyao took a sneaky look over there. Yu Meiqiao seemed to be sorting her storage bag with her back facing them and did not look over, so Li Jingyao asked. Ruowei, I want to tell you a piece of big news. Do you know Sect Master Su Xiangxue of the Kama Sutra sect? She turned out to be a virgin. So what? Tang Ruowei blinked. I already know this. What? You know? Li Jingyao grabbed her shoulders and said shakingly. Then Sect Master Su Xiangxue is interesting to your master, can you see it too? Except for my dense master, everyone can tell it. Tang Ruowei rolled her eyes. Then do you have any opinion? Li Jingyao asked with disappointment. Why should I have an opinion? Tang Ruowei thought for a while and said. Oh, should I congratulate master for finally getting a girlfriend? I'm not talking about this, Ruowei, don't you have any feelings for Sword Patriarch? Li Jingyao raised her eyebrows and said. When I expressed my affection for Sword Patriarch before, didn't you also feel a little unhappy? Tang Ruowei stunned for a moment and then denied. I do not have it. Li Jingyao looked at her up and down. Then have you ever thought about finding a partner? Tang Ruowei glanced down at her chest, then shook her head. How can I find one when my exercise has not successful? I'm impressed. Li Jingyao was angry and laughed. You and Sword Patriarch are almost forged by the same mold, you two deserve to be master and apprentice. She finally realized that Tang Ruowei did have a good impression of her master, but because of her physical defects, she had a sense of inferiority. It was the same as Bai Qiran's feeling that his cultivation level was low. So why does Sister Li have a good impression of my master? Tang Ruowei glanced at Bai Qiran then asked. There is nothing about him that is likable. Well, he's rich, handsome, strong and talented. Except for his habit of rubbing salt on others' wounds and his age, he has no shortcomings. And I don't care about these two. I have a good temper and we are both cultivators, so the age gap won't matter. Li Jingyao replied without hesitation, thinking about it a lot. More importantly, Senior has always cared about the world peace in his heart, and he is also very good to the people around him. These are all bonus points for choosing a husband. A man without no merit can't attract a woman like Sect Master Su. Am I right, Ruowei? Tang Ruowei thought about it carefully and found that what Li Jingyao said seemed to make sense. Sister Ruowei. At this time, Li Jinyao took her palm again. Are we friends? Tang Ruowei hesitated. Yes. Well? Li Jinyao took Tang Ruowei's hand and said seriously. Help me conquer your master. What? Tang Ruowei squinted her eyes with a dazed expression. Help me conquer your dense master. Li Jinyao raised Tang Ruowei's hands and said seriously. In exchange, I will also become your ally. If one day in the future you realize your true feeling, I will help you in turn. After a while, the two walked out of the cave and came in front of everyone. Oh, I'm wondering where did you go? Bai Qiran looked at the two girls and said. Are you all rested well? Yes, we are. Li Jinyao and Tang Ruowei both nodded and replied. Then let's go. Bai Qiran led the team to go out first and did not notice the eye contact between Li Jinyao and Tang Ruowei. Only Yu Meiqiao on the side noticed this and then touched her white chin thoughtfully. Dash. Boom. Boom. There was a series of explosions outside the hall, and the vibration caused the dust accumulated in the hall for countless years to fall down and hit the black-robed man, but he didn't notice it. He was lying on the throne in the temple, staring at the sky blankly. His eyes, which were bright before, had now become lifeless. With his skinny appearance he looked like he was really dead. The explosion soon subsided. He heard footsteps coming to the front of the hall, and then someone shook their storage bags at the door, and the high-grade spirit stones made a clear sound when they collided. The 187th pass. The black-robed man remained silent, numbly counting the people outside the temple in his heart. Originally, these high-grade spirit stones were consumables prepared by the true owner of the wise immortal mansion to help cultivators restore the energy and physical strength during the trial. But since the guy Bai Qiran put in a storage bag at the entrance of his hall more than a month ago, these spirit stones have become mere drops and trophies. Over the past month, Bai Qiran has gone back and forth in the 5 clinging aggregates trial a total of 187 times, and he brought more people here. In the beginning it was just a female cultivator, and then gradually became a few, then more than a dozen, and in the end almost all the disciples who participated in the exploratory operation united here. More and more people took trial at the same time, and even the space and transmission mechanism of the mansion slowly became overload, thus the frequency of the refresh the trial has to be extended to complete the buffer of energy operation. It's like the number of players became overwhelming, the server had no choice but to restart. Some of his former subordinates and companions, hiding here with only their souls, also used the means of possessing to snatch the bodies of several of them, and mixed in the team, but they were all caught by that white-haired weird guy and were killed. Originally, the number of land immortals was not large even in their time. In order to avoid the crisis, these land immortals sealed their souls in the resident soul crystals they refined, which was the kind of black prism that Bai Qiran found. Only a handful of land immortals like him, whose soul was strong enough, could stay awake, waiting for opportunities, and then used the soul crystal to liberate the remaining land immortals. The few that Bai Qiran killed were the only land immortals left in this cave that could possess others on their own. Now, leaving aside the skull, he was left alone. And he could only stay in this room to survive, lest his soul would dissipate on its own one day like a candle's fire in the wind. But this time the situation seemed to be slightly different. Just as the black-robed man was in a daze, someone suddenly opened the door of the hall and walked in unexpectedly. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.